Hey! What time do you think it is? Looking at the clock, it's still 5:30 a.m. What time? It's still 5:30. What's up with you, getting up this early? I answered groggily, but Brandon keeps on relentlessly. What do you mean it's still 5:30? It's common sense for a wife to get up earlier than her husband, get ready, and prepare breakfast. Hearing Brandon rage like that first thing in the morning, I couldn't believe my ears. When on earth did we go back in time? It's like a line straight out of an old-fashioned drama. Ever since marrying Brandon, we've had separate bedrooms, and no intimacy at all. Then one day, Brandon collapsed at work and had to be urgently admitted to the hospital for surgery. Waiting outside the OR, I heard a young doctor scream. "Oh! What in the world is this?" This surgery would reveal Brandon's surprising secret to me, as well as how difficult my situation really was. And realizing I couldn't go on like this, I decided to reclaim my true self, with some help from someone. My name is Natalie Scott, a 42-year-old helping with my family business. Before getting married, I worked in healthcare. The job was somewhat enjoyable, but among my friends, I was the only one not married. With both my parents already passed away and me being all alone at home, I was anxious to get married. Then, one day, as I was drinking alone in a bar, a man approached me. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" The man who spoke to me was Brandon, my now husband. Brandon was 3 years older than me and owned a small manufacturing business. As we talked, it seemed he was also single without a partner. We hit it off, sharing stories about our lives. Two single adults. I was hoping for a somewhat romantic night, but we just made plans to meet again and called it an early night. From there, we naturally started dating, meeting up once a week. Dates with the quiet and serious Brandon were just calm conversations in cafes or parks. But his seemingly kind nature gradually drew me in. And then, on our third date. Hey! It doesn't make sense to date aimlessly, right? Watching Brandon nervously bring it up, I got a bit excited. Are you saying? Yes, I know we've only been dating for a month, but considering our ages, I was thinking, maybe we should consider your marriage? Is that okay with you? Truly, it was an unusual proposal. I did think so, but I was also eager to get married and I thought Brandon was a good person, so I quickly replied with a yes. Yes! I want to spend my life with you. As soon as I agreed, Brandon showed a broad smile, delighted by my response. Since both of us had no parents, we decided to have a small wedding and just complete our marriage registration. To help with Brandon's company, I quit my job as we got married. And so began our married life with Brandon. But it was also the start of days filled with anguish. Brandon and I had no intimate relations from the time we met until we got married. I thought Brandon was just being serious and didn't want to engage in frivolous relationships with women. I believed that once we were married, we would be able to enjoy our life together as husband and wife. That's what I believed. But on the first day of our marriage, Brandon made some unexpected rules. "I'll sleep in this bedroom, so Natalie, please sleep in another room. Also, since I come home late from work, go ahead and use the bathroom first." I was surprised by Brandon's statement and asked with a tone of disbelief. "Wait, does that mean we are going to sleep separately? Even though we're a couple?" Even when I asked, Brandon, with an indifferent face, insisted on his point of view. "I can't sleep well when someone else is in the same room." Despite feeling dissatisfied with his reasoning, I didn't want to start an argument on the first day, so I didn't say anything more. The next morning, I was startled awake by a loud voice before the alarm set for 6 a.m. went off. "Hey! What time do you think it is?" Looking at the clock, it was still 5:30 a.m. "What time?" "It's still 5:30. What's going on, waking up this early?" I answered sleepily, but Brandon continued without mercy. "What do you mean it's still 5:30? It's common sense for a wife to wake up earlier than her husband, get ready, and prepare breakfast." I couldn't believe what I was hearing from Brandon yelling early in the morning. What era are we talking about here? It felt like a line from an old-timey drama. However, looking at Brandon's face, I saw an anger I hadn't seen before. Thinking it best not to argue, I quickly got dressed and started preparing the meal. It may be taken for granted, but even though we have separate bedrooms, we still eat together. As we sat across from each other at the breakfast table, something caught my attention. It was already July, yet Brandon was wearing a long-sleeved sweater. Thinking that I might have to prepare summer clothes for him, I asked Brandon. "I'm sorry for only having a sweater available at this time of year. Should I be preparing summer clothes for you?" At my question, Brandon started choking on his food, coughing out his response in a hurry. "No, I wear this all year round. I get cold easily. You know, with the air conditioning, it gets chilly in the upcoming season." If he really dislikes the cold, that would make sense. But there was no need for him to panic like that. Brandon's unnatural behavior left me unsure of how to respond. From then on, even though I helped out at the company in the morning, Brandon told me to come home early in the evening to prepare dinner, so I returned home early. Brandon didn't just comment on the meals, he had detailed complaints about the cleaning and laundry as well, leaving me no time to relax even when I came home early. I cleaned every corner of the house and neatly folded and put away the dry laundry. Preparing dinner and taking a shower before Brandon got home became my daily routine after we got married. Brandon is the type of husband who doesn't lift a finger at home. I understand he's busy being a business owner, but I wish he would help out with the housework a little. I think so, but even a slight complaint might set him off yelling again. While making dinner, I suddenly wondered, what did I get married for? Ever since then, our bedrooms have been separate, so there's no intimacy at all. Right now, I don't feel happy at all, even though we got married. Rather, I might have even lost sight of my true self. Thinking so, I suddenly felt overwhelmed with sadness, and tears started flowing endlessly. While I was sobbing alone, around 5 p.m., my phone rang with a call from the company. It was one of our female employees. "It's serious. The boss suddenly collapsed. We've called an ambulance, so please head to the hospital immediately." Hearing that, I was momentarily lost for words. Sensing my state, the employee calmly told me the name of the hospital. Trying to compose myself, I thanked the employee and immediately called a taxi. Upon arriving at the hospital and giving my name at the reception, I was guided to the treatment room where Brandon was. I was told to wait outside, so I sat on a chair placed in front of the door. The door to the treatment room opened, and a veteran doctor, about Brandon's age, came out. I stood up and approached the doctor. "Excuse me, I'm Natalie Scott, Brandon's wife. How is my husband's condition?" "Your husband is not in life-threatening condition, but he needs to be hospitalized immediately and requires surgery." "Really?" After greeting the doctor, I didn't see Brandon but just completed the paperwork for his admission and surgery before going home. Normally, I would have stayed with him. The doctors and nurses might think I'm a cold wife, but I couldn't bring myself to stay by Brandon's side since we weren't close. And then, on the day of the surgery, I didn't go to see Brandon before the surgery and arrived at the hospital around the time it was supposed to start. While waiting outside, I heard a young man's scream coming from the operating room. "What in the world is this? What is the doctor saying?" It must have been the assistant doctor who screamed. The young doctor seemed frightened, and the chief surgeon reassured him. Yet, the young doctor responded in a voice that sounded as if he might start trembling at any moment. "Even if you say that, it's the first time I've ever seen such an incredible tattoo. What should I do?" "Stay calm. The tattoo won't interfere with the surgery." What was all the fuss about? The loud voices were even audible outside the operating room. I remember they were talking about tattoos. The assistant seemed unreliable, but since the chief surgeon appeared competent, I waited for the surgery to end with peace of mind. A few hours later, the surgery was over, and 2 doctors came out. One was the young doctor in his mid-20s who had screamed earlier. He looked as if he had seen something unpleasant. The other was the chief surgeon, the veteran doctor I had greeted the other day. He looked disappointedly at the young doctor. The young doctor indeed looked like a well-off young man who had never faced hardships. I stood up and looked at the veteran doctor. Beside him, the young doctor looked at me, looking apologetic, and said, "I'm sorry about your husband's back tattoo." Hey! Stop that. I didn't quite understand what the two were talking about. Especially the words of the young doctor. "I've been hearing about a tattoo, but what does that mean?" At my question, both doctors looked surprised. "We're talking about the large demon tattoo on your husband's back. It covers his entire back, you know." I couldn't hide my surprise at the young doctor's unexpected reply. So that was why Brandon kept the bedroom separate. The veteran doctor remained composed. "I apologize for the disturbance. The surgery went well. Your husband is going to be fine. Can I talk to my husband now?" "Yes, if you could wait a moment." After waiting for a while, I was guided into the treatment room. There lay Brandon, waking up from anesthesia, dressed in a hospital gown. Noticing me, Brandon looked uncomfortable. "I didn't want you to see this. Why are you here when I didn't call for you?" Brandon's blunt attitude left me unable to even say well done. Maybe Brandon thought it was bad that I found out about his long-hidden tattoo. Though I couldn't see the demon on his back, his shoulder area was clearly visible through the hospital gown. But why did Brandon think he could keep such a large tattoo hidden? Curious as I was, considering it was after surgery, I thought it might be better to ask about it later and didn't inquire further. Brandon just sulked and turned away. The young doctor looked back and forth between Brandon and me, asking if I wasn't going to say anything to my husband. I didn't know what to say in such a situation. Then, Brandon spoke up. "Natalie, if you've got no business here, then leave." "Excuse me?" "Having you stand there with that gloomy face makes it feel like a wake. Just go home, will you?" At Brandon's words, the young doctor furrowed his brows and tilted his head in confusion. They're probably wondering if we're really a couple. Right. It seems pointless for me to stay, so I'll be going now. In the end, I left the hospital just as Brandon had told me to. I didn't feel like going straight home, so I had dinner out. As I was leaving the restaurant, a man called out to me from behind. "Natalie." When I turned around, there stood Kevin Walker, the chief surgeon who had taken care of Brandon earlier. Kevin seemed to be on his way home from work. "Thank you for everything." I was about to thank Kevin, but he started talking as if to cut me off. "I was thinking, Brandon has such a nice wife. But it seems there's some complication?" From Kevin's tone, it seemed he knew Brandon from before. "What do you mean by that?" "Sorry, I didn't mean to be rude. It just seemed strange to me. Normally, if a husband collapses at work and needs emergency hospitalization, his wife would stay by his side." "I'm sorry for causing any trouble at the hospital." I apologized, thinking I had caused inconvenience to the hospital staff. But Kevin shook his head and replied, "No, that's not what I meant. It's just that you seemed unaware of Brandon's tattoo. I found that curious." Kevin seemed to know something about the tattoo Brandon had. Curious, I asked him for more details. Kevin said he and Brandon were in the same middle school. Brandon started causing trouble around that time, riding motorcycles with his friends. He hardly ever attended school. At that time, to intimidate others, he got a large demon tattoo on his back. Kevin, who was the student leader at the time, couldn't stand such delinquency among his friends. We were in the same class in the first year. We weren't close, but I don't think Brandon was a bad guy from the start. Kevin seemed to have wanted to rehabilitate Brandon, the once serious student. Making a big decision, he confronted the delinquent group Brandon was part of, desperately trying to persuade him to change. "Brandon, please, leave this group and come back to school," he said in front of all the delinquents. But despite his resolve, Kevin was treated harshly by Brandon's friends. However, Kevin's efforts may have paid off, as Brandon started attending school again and later went on to a high school after graduation. I was just surprised to learn about Brandon's past. It seems Brandon doesn't remember me anymore. But it's good to know he reformed and has been working seriously. However, it seems your marriage to him is not straightforward. It was embarrassing and disheartening to realize that our unusual marital relationship was apparent even to outsiders. I'm really embarrassed to be seen as an unnatural couple by others. At my words, Kevin lightly shook his head again. No, it's not you who's unnatural. It seems like Brandon is somehow neglecting you. Hearing that, I indeed started to feel the same. Somehow, I felt I could talk about anything with Kevin. Maybe as a doctor, he's used to supporting the families of patients. I felt somewhat guilty for burdening him with such personal matters. I'm sorry for troubling you with such private matters concerning a patient's family. No. Right now, I'm not talking to you as a doctor, but as a person. I used to confront Brandon because I couldn't stand his delinquency. Now, for a different reason, I find myself unable to forgive him again. At that time, I couldn't grasp the full meaning of Kevin's words. A different reason? I asked, and Kevin showed a bashful smile. Well, aside from that, if you ever get confused about Brandon, feel free to consult me. I might be able to help a little. Kevin's willingness to listen made me feel like I could talk to him about anything. He knew Brandon's past well. So, I thought if I shared my current situation with him, he might help me find a way to resolve my troubles. I told Kevin in detail about my relationship with Brandon from when we met to the present. Kevin listened intently, then frowned, looking concerned. Something's off. What was Brandon thinking when he got involved with you? I don't understand his feelings either. I answered, and tears began to well up in my eyes. Talking to someone made me realize how unsatisfied I was with the way I was living. Just leave it to me. I felt guilty for bothering someone else with my situation. But Kevin's kindness made me feel relieved and happy. I decided to try to resolve the ambiguous relationship with Brandon, with Kevin's help. The next morning, I visited Brandon's hospital room. I had heard from Kevin that his post-surgery condition was stable, so I wanted to talk to Brandon. However, Brandon wouldn't even look at me, just stared out the window. Still wanting to clarify the truth, I asked him without hesitation. Why have you been silent about this? Such a large tattoo was bound to be discovered eventually. Or did you plan to keep it hidden forever, even from your own wife? Brandon remained silent. Then, he muttered softly. I thought you would run away. Run away? What do you mean? When I pressed him, Brandon started to talk about his past relationships with women. According to him, every time he got involved with someone, the relationship would end as soon as they saw his tattoo. Brandon, who appears to be a respectable young man working earnestly. No one could possibly imagine that there's a large demon tattoo on his back. It looks as if he's part of some nefarious organization, a fearsome demon on his back. Weren't you only involved in bad activities until middle school? Why didn't you remove the tattoo when you reformed? As I pressed for answers, Brandon glared at me with fierce eyes and shouted. I didn't want to remove this tattoo, no matter what. Why? I wanted to know the truth behind Brandon's feelings, but he didn't seem willing to answer. Instead, he turned the questions on me. More importantly, how do you know about my middle school days? I never talked about that. I heard it from the person who was the student leader back then. Kevin? It seemed Brandon remembered Kevin. But knowing we had reunited, why had he remained silent? Kevin had desperately tried to reform Brandon. Kevin clearly remembered you, so why didn't you say even a word of thanks? It's thanks to him you were able to reform and become who you are today, isn't it? At my question, Brandon tilted his head. What are you misunderstanding? I decided to straighten up because a buddy of mine died in a motorcycle accident. I decided to quit riding bikes and live a straight life for his sake. This tattoo is, in a way, a keepsake of his. The truth about the tattoo was revealed. Still, I felt somewhat unsatisfied with Brandon's explanation. Why? Kevin also tried desperately to reform you, facing resistance from your friends. It's terrible to act like that doesn't matter. Stop nagging. Why do you keep taking his side? Do you like him or something? Brandon pressed, but I felt no guilt. After all, there was no reason for Brandon to be jealous in such a marital relationship. I decided it was time to clarify things and asked Brandon. What about you? Don't you like me? What did we get married for? Well, Brandon seemed at a loss for words. I glared at him, determined not to leave until I got a clear answer. So? Clarify it for me. Well, after my parents passed away in the last 3 years, I had no one to take care of the house. So, I thought I needed to get married to manage. Just for that. Knowing the real reason Brandon married me was a shock. Wanting no further discussion, I left the hospital room. Kevin was standing at the entrance. He led me to the lobby, saying it was best if Brandon didn't hear our conversation. It's just as I thought. Shall we proceed with the plan then? Yes. I decided to go ahead with the worst-case scenario plan Kevin had suggested. And 2 weeks passed. Today was Brandon's discharge day. However, since that day, I hadn't visited Brandon's room once and didn't go to the hospital to pick him up despite knowing he would be discharged. I have been busy at the company these 2 weeks. While Brandon was hospitalized, I had been acting as the head of the business, handling various procedures. Brandon was supposed to rest at home for a while after discharge. So, I prepared a day's meals in the morning and worked until evening. Since his hospitalization, Brandon and I had grown even more distant. With fewer face-to-face interactions, we argued less. However, avoiding each other worked well as I proceeded with my current task. A month after his discharge, as Brandon was getting better, he visited the company. Upon entering, he was shocked by the drastically changed interior. I watched secretly from the back office. What the heck? Even the manufacturing machines and employee desks are all gone. Hearing his exclamation, all the employees approached Brandon. Thank you for everything you've done for so long. What do you mean? Brandon, unable to grasp the situation, looked around bewildered. Seeing this, the employees exchanged glances. Probably unsure who should break the news. Actually, our company has been acquired by Walker Industries located in the same region. Starting tomorrow, we will be employed there. What? I haven't heard anything about this. Brandon's voice echoed throughout the office, surprised by the news of the acquisition. Thinking it was about time, I stepped forward in front of everyone. Oh? I'm sorry, Brandon. The decision was made quite suddenly, so I was late in informing you. What? A major decision like an acquisition should be discussed with me first. Brandon was fuming with anger. That's true, but actually, we've run into a bit of trouble, I said, showing him a photo. It was taken by a male employee who had recently left the company. The photo showed Brandon secretly changing in the men's locker room. It clearly captured the large demon tattoo on his back. The man thought the company president might be involved in some criminal organization, and after consulting with other employees, he left the company. And now, all the employees here harbor distrust towards Brandon. Not just because of the tattoo, but that wasn't the only reason. Since getting married, Brandon started delegating all the troublesome company procedures to me. And he would sneak out of the company to go gambling or to the racetrack. There had been sightings from people in the neighborhood, so we knew about it for a while. The photo taken in the changing room was snapped when he was changing to sneak out, and nobody was supposed to be there. Coincidentally, that employee came in late for a personal reason and managed to take the evidence. Upon learning everything, other employees also wanted to leave, but that's when I informed everyone about the acquisition. One of the employees said to Brandon, We couldn't continue under someone like you, who dumps all work on your wife and acts selfishly. Doesn't it question your dignity as a company executive? All the other employees nodded in agreement. Brandon, looking distressed, muttered softly. It has nothing to do with it. More importantly, someone who can't even cherish his own wife has no right to lead many people, Kevin interjected as he walked in. Kevin! Why are you here? This has nothing to do with you. No, it has everything to do with me. I was the one who suggested our company acquire yours. What? Yes, the acquiring company, Walker Industries, is run by Kevin's brother as the CEO. In other words, that company is Kevin's family business. Kevin had been genuinely concerned that I shouldn't continue being with Brandon. Not just as a husband, but Brandon had shortcomings as a director too. That's why I was facing difficulties both personally and professionally. Kevin had taken all this into account and devised this plan. Brandon, finding himself isolated and at fault both at home and work due to his own negligence. He realized he might lose everything and started to ingratiate himself with Kevin. I was wondering, could I possibly join your company too? Suddenly, he was asking to be employed there as well. Everyone around looked at Brandon with expressions of dismay. Kevin sighed deeply and placed a hand on Brandon's shoulder. If that were the case, it would defeat the purpose of everyone here leaving this company. Besides, it's better for Natalie to be freed from you sooner. When Kevin said that, Brandon quickly turned to me and pressed. Natalie! Do you want to leave me? How am I supposed to live without you? Appealing to me with desperate eyes, I couldn't help but respond with frustration. I'm not the kind of person who can continue with such a superficial marital relationship. Just so you know, I'm neither your mother nor your maid. You need to be alone for once and learn to take care of yourself. After I firmly stated this, Brandon was left speechless. I decided to deliver the final blow by presenting him with divorce papers. Also, I've decided to work as a caregiving staff at the hospital on Kevin's recommendation. I can support myself with my own earnings now. So, let's get a divorce. At my words, Brandon panicked. Divorce? No, wait. Even if you're okay with it, I can't live on my own if I'm unemployed. So, Brandon, just give it up. You, always thinking only about yourself, never considering the feelings of others. Someone like you needs to be alone and cool your head. Kevin yelled at Brandon, leaving him trembling and unable to retort. And so, I left Brandon and moved out of the house. While working as a caregiving staff, I initially stayed in the hospital's staff dormitory. Being over 40 and moving into a dorm filled mostly with young nursing assistants made me a bit self-conscious. However, I felt liberated from my distressing life and was elated. From now on, I aim to work hard and live independently. After the divorce, Brandon continued to live alone in the former family home. Since the company was acquired by Walker Industries, all employees moved on. And the site of Brandon's former company is now vacant. Though unemployed, he still had his own home, so he shouldn't have had to worry about rent, or so one would think. Lately, passing by Brandon's house on my way to work, I hear loud arguments between a man and a woman daily. No matter how late at night, the shouting is always audible, prompting me to ask the neighbors. According to them, Brandon is now cohabitating with a woman. Perhaps desperate not to be alone, he quickly found someone. However, the woman has been complaining about Brandon to the neighbors. When I asked what the complaints were, it was just as I had thought. He earns nothing and leaves all the housework to her, just as before. Frustrated, she frequently confronts him, leading to daily arguments. And they sometimes even threw objects, with the sound of breaking glass echoing in the neighborhood. It's likely that the tattoo, initially hidden, has been discovered, adding to the complaints. It seems a man like Brandon never learns, regardless of whom he is with. The neighbors are also troubled, being disturbed by the noise from Brandon's house until late every night. However, it seems that someone eventually reported the noise complaints to the police, and Brandon was ordered to leave. I heard from the neighbors that the woman he was living with broke up with him at the same time as the eviction. Interestingly, I often see Brandon wrapped in a cardboard box in the park. Since he appears to be without a fixed address, it would likely make reemployment even more difficult. If I ever come across him, I plan to simply ignore and avoid him. But I doubt I'll have to worry about that much longer. After completing my training, my salary as a caregiving staff at the hospital significantly increased. They probably considered the fact that I originally have over 20 years of career experience. I moved into a condo suitable for living alone and bought a car, considering the night shifts. Now that I'm commuting by car, it's unlikely I'll run into homeless Brandon unless something extraordinary happens. At work, I often see Kevin. Thanks to him, I've become more positive about life. And I feel like I've regained my true self. Interestingly, Kevin has also been through a divorce and is currently single. Staff at work often whisper about the possibility of Kevin and me getting remarried. However, I'm content with my current life, so marriage doesn't seem appealing anymore. Kevin, with his carefree personality, probably feels the same. Kevin and I are quite alike. We may not become a couple, but I look forward to continuing as good friends at the same workplace. Finding a friend with whom I can discuss anything at this age is rare. One morning, suddenly, my father-in-law who I lived with passed away. I was always ignored, so honestly, I don't feel sad. My mother-in-law and Benjamin headed to prepare the venue earlier, and as I was getting ready, I heard Jackson making a phone call in the hallway. I married her out of pity because she can't have kids. It's basically charity. I gasped. And yet, she's so arrogant it's infuriating. Pretending to be Benjamin's mother when she's nothing but a maid. He laughed then. We'll have her cover the funeral cost. With that money, I'll buy a high-end bag for you. Charlotte wanted one, right? He continued talking, unaware that I was listening in the hallway. Trying to maintain my composure, my body trembled with rage. I'll put an end to this. This person is neither family nor anything to me. I'll let out all the pent-up frustration I've been holding back. He's mistaken if he thinks I'll always be docile. I am Madison, a 50-year-old housewife. I married Jackson 11 years ago, and have been living with my stepson Benjamin and my in-laws since. The reason Jackson and I met was through a mutual friend. After being dumped by my fiancé because of infertility, feeling depressed, a friend, feeling sorry for me, organized a gathering with their friends for drinks. Jackson was not very talkative but seemed sincere. We found common ground in our love for movies, and he was the one who suggested we start dating with marriage in mind. His ex-wife was into gambling, racked up debt, and left, abandoning her young son. When I heard he was looking for a mother for his son, I met Benjamin on one of our dates. Benjamin, without any shyness, quickly took a liking to me. Later, when I was introduced to my in-laws, they seemed like nice people, and by our one-year anniversary, I strongly desired to become part of Jackson's family. But looking back, it was clear that Jackson and my in-laws had been deceiving me all along. Fooled, I had a simple wedding and started living with Jackson and Benjamin. Shortly after getting married, Jackson asked me to become a full-time housewife. I enjoyed my clerical job and wanted to continue, but he was persistent. I want you to focus on Benjamin. You can return to work once he's a bit older. All right. I could see where Jackson was coming from. After all, I was inexperienced in raising children. The idea of raising someone else's child properly was also a source of anxiety for me. I sought advice from friends who had children, and desperately gathered information from the internet and parenting books. Initially, Benjamin seemed affectionate towards me, but as he grew older, he started to assert his independence and eventually began to talk back. Instead of consoling me, Jackson would mock me with a smirk. Seems like a real mom is different. After all, you're just a stranger. Stop it. Why do you have to say things like that? When I objected, Jackson raised his eyebrows in surprise. What's wrong with telling the truth? Jackson was always out, either at work or drinking with colleagues. He completely dumped childcare on me, yet all he did was make snide remarks. And whenever Benjamin did something he didn't like, he blamed it all on me. Crying all the time is because of Madison's bad parenting. Got a cold again? Probably malnutrition. It's because you feed him instant food for lunch. He'd get cranky teaching multiplication to Benjamin, who had just started elementary school, complaining about his slow learning. He's just learned addition. Multiplication is too soon for him. When I protested, Jackson laughed as if he was astonished. I was able to do middle school work at his age. Looks like Madison's stupidity has rubbed off on him. He'd smirk at me, saying, "Well, you're just a high school grad, right?" When Benjamin was around 8 years old, we started living with his parents. This was never part of the plan, but it suddenly came up because of my mother-in-law's deteriorating health. I was told I have high blood pressure at a medical checkup. I need to undergo treatment and follow a diet. Hearing this, Jackson suggested they move in with us. It'll be easier if you come to our place. Mom doesn't have a driver's license, and it's tough to go to appointments, right? Madison can drive you. I couldn't believe my ears. It's one thing if he were to help, but why try to play the filial son at my expense? He did that without even asking me. Oh, is that okay? That'd be a great help. We were struggling with the cost of remodeling the house. Great. Once you've sold the house, you can move in any time. I was flabbergasted by Jackson's audacity. This house is my inheritance from my parents, you know. After hanging up the phone, Jackson nonchalantly informed me. So, my parents are moving in, just so you know. Just so I know? Don't decide things on your own. Talk to me first. It's my house. Jackson made a displeased face. You don't like living with my parents? It's not that. It's natural for a wife to take care of her mother-in-law. You're free anyway, so be useful. My opinion was completely ignored, and soon the living with his parents began. Living together meant being at the mercy of my mother-in-law. She would complain about the weather, feeling sluggish, or just not in the mood. She used these as excuses to avoid going to the hospital. Then let's not go. You're okay with your illness getting worse? What a terrible person. On the other hand, if I insisted too much on going, she'd get annoyed at being nagged. Once finally in the car, it was a barrage of complaints. Your driving is reckless. Drive safely. Don't drive so slow. Speed it up. As soon as we got home, she sat on the sofa and started complaining. I got car sick because of you. Why are you so bad at driving? She could use the bus that goes from the nearest bus stop right to the hospital. But I guess she thinks the bus fare is a waste of money. Not just for doctor visits, my mother-in-law complains about the house too. This house feels so old-fashioned. Are you sure it was remodeled? It's uncomfortable not being designed for two families. And that's her line, even though she's the one imposing on us. My father-in-law had his quirks too. Even when Jackson and his mother criticized me, he wouldn't join in, so I thought he was on my side, but it seemed he just wanted to avoid conflict. Proof of that is, he wouldn't respond to greetings, and when he did talk to me, it was only to ask what's for dinner, or is the bathroom clean, as if he wanted to interact with me as little as possible, and then I found out he spends his days at gambling or going to the races. If he's got that much free time, I really wish he'd drive my mother-in-law to her appointments. After all, she is his wife. My mother-in-law also had a lot to say about the meals I prepared. His parents prefer a fish-based diet. However, Jackson and Benjamin like stronger flavors, so I have to prepare different menus for them. As if that wasn't hard enough, my mother-in-law needs a low-sodium diet, so I end up making 3 different meals for 5 people. Without knowing how much trouble I go through planning the menu every day, my mother-in-law complained. This is bland. I can't eat something this tasteless. You're doing this to spite me, aren't you? What a mean daughter-in-law. When it's low in salt, it's naturally going to be bland. Please bear with it. Then my mother-in-law complained to Jackson. Jackson, Madison is being horrible to me. Jackson looked annoyed at my mother-in-law's complaint. Make something tastier. If you say so, why don't you cook? When I said that, caring yet firm, my mother-in-law glared at me. A wife talking back to her husband. Anyway, please bear with the bland taste. Making excuses for your poor cooking skills. Despite having pushed the cooking onto me because she can't cook, it seems she doesn't have a shred of gratitude. Slowly, I started to feel disillusioned with Jackson always siding with my mother-in-law. One day, as I was walking back from shopping, I stopped in my tracks when I overheard my mother-in-law talking. I wondered what she was discussing, but she was actually spreading bad things about me to the neighbors. My daughter-in-law is so defiant. Living off Jackson's salary, yet she's always talking back to me and Jackson. Does she even understand her place? Really? Lazing around at home without working, always neglecting the housework. She pushes cleaning and laundry onto me and does nothing. Listening in from behind a fence, I was dumbfounded. Ever since we started living together, my mother-in-law hasn't even washed a single cup. Looks like this daughter-in-law is a dud too. It's bad for Benjamin's upbringing. Jackson too, but your grandson is the biggest victim here. Poor thing. The resident's tone of pity made my mother-in-law dramatically lament. See, it's me. Stressed out by being bossed around by her, and now my stomach hurts. You've had a tough time. Don't push yourself too hard. I finally understood. No wonder I've been avoided by the neighbors recently. I clenched my fists, calming my anger with great effort, and took the long way home. That evening, when Jackson came home, I confronted him about my mother-in-law's actions. Don't you think spreading rumors is a bit much? He was just agreeing with what the neighbors said. Jackson made a face of disgust. You just need to improve your cooking skills. I'm doing the best I can. Anyway, just try to get along, will you? I was driven by a sense of helplessness and anger. Do I have to keep enduring these snide remarks every day? When Benjamin became a teenager, he hit his rebellious phase. Having grown up seeing Jackson and my in-laws look down on me, it was natural that he would mock me. He hurled insults at me like it was nothing. Wash my gym clothes by today. I need them for tomorrow. Leftovers for lunch? That's just being lazy. You're a stay-at-home wife, you have time to make something proper. I hate this brand of stock. Know my preferences at least. You're useless. Despite relying on me for everything, he was always finding faults. And unbelievably, he would kick me out of the house when his friends came over. Stay out of sight. It'd be fine if you were beautiful, but having an old hag like you around is embarrassing. This is my house. Don't get cocky. You're eating off my dad's salary, aren't you? Jackson and the in-laws, who were nearby, didn't seem to care at all. Furious, I finally scolded Benjamin. If you keep up this attitude, I'll stop taking care of you altogether. Abandoning your child? You're a failure as a mother. Benjamin became enraged. Then, Jackson interjected with a look of annoyance. Madison, don't react to everything the kid says. It's immature. I'm correcting his rude behavior towards adults. I raised my voice, pouring out my grievances. Hey, why don't you get involved with Benjamin a bit more as a father? I'm providing for the family, isn't that enough? Jackson glared at me, defiant. Who do you think allows you to have such an easy life every day? Since you're useless and can't earn money, the least you could do is devote yourself to my family. He yelled at me loudly. Otherwise, there's no point in keeping you in this house. If you don't like it, we can get a divorce. I'll kick you out right now. And to think you can't even have kids, what a failure. I was close to tears. To think he could say such horrible things so calmly. Behind Jackson, Benjamin and my mother-in-law were looking at me with malicious smiles. Then I'll start working. I can contribute to society too. Working from home would be okay, right? Who would want to hire you? If you slack off on the housework, I'll make you quit immediately. After this exchange, I decided to start working from home. I had experience as a sales admin until a few years ago, so I was good with computer work. I registered with an outsourcing company, and eventually, I started getting constant work requests as I built up my performance. I worked in the bedroom, from late at night until early morning, when the family was asleep. Lately, Jackson has been sleeping in the study, bringing a bed in there, so I can use the computer at night without complaints. I would prefer to work in the sunny living room during the day, but my mother-in-law spends all day glued to the TV, watching talk shows and historical dramas, so that's almost impossible. By the time Benjamin entered high school, my work had stabilized, and I was able to save a fixed amount every month. One morning, as usual, my mother-in-law went to wake up her husband and came down to the kitchen looking pale. While preparing breakfast and Jackson drinking coffee at the dining table, she said in a shaky voice, "Dad is..." "What?" We all rushed to the bedroom, and there was my father-in-law, lying in bed as if he were asleep, having passed away. After that, it was chaos. Jackson took over for the panicked mother-in-law, calling the family doctor to issue a death certificate, arranging the funeral service, and taking care of all the other procedures. Seeing my mother-in-law usually so strong, now in a daze, I felt somewhat sorry for her. But that feeling quickly vanished. While I was doing the cleaning, laundry, and meal preparation as usual, my mother-in-law said spitefully, "You sure can keep your cool. After all, you've been taken care of by your father. Don't you have a human heart?" As I was setting the table, I looked at my mother-in-law with disdain and sighed softly. I can say this for certain. I never once felt taken care of by my father-in-law since getting married. Being with my father-in-law made me feel like I was air. It was unpleasant. So, it feels strange suddenly not having him around, but I don't feel sad in the slightest. Well, I'm still his daughter-in-law, so I'll attend the funeral and fulfill my duties. With that in mind, I took out clothes from the closet on the second floor and prepared a bag. Benjamin and my mother-in-law said they would prepare the funeral home and left the house before me. As I was getting dressed and walking down the stairs, I heard Jackson's voice. He seemed to be talking to someone on his phone. "Yeah, Dad, just suddenly. So, I'm a bit tied up with everything. I'll be a bit late to meet you tonight. Sorry, especially since it's an important day." I felt a sense of discomfort. In front of my mother-in-law, he acted sorrowful, but his voice didn't sound like someone whose father had just died. "Why did I marry such a plain woman?" Jackson explained with a laugh. "I felt sorry for her because she can't have kids. Basically, it was for charity." I gasped. "And yet, she's so cheeky it's annoying. Acting like she's Benjamin's mother when she's just a maid." He chuckled then. "I'll have her cover the funeral cost. With that money, I'll buy a high-brand bag for you. Charlotte wanted one, right?" He continued talking in a cheery tone, unaware that I was listening in the hallway. When I showed my face after he ended the call, he was startled for a moment but quickly put on a smile. "Oh, you were here?" "Yes." "Aren't you leaving yet?" "I'm heading out now. Want to ride together?" "Maybe I will." Trying to keep calm, my body trembled with anger. I murmured in my heart, "I'm done with this. Such a person is neither family nor anything to me. I'll vent all the frustration I've been holding back. He's mistaken if he thinks I'll stay quiet forever." The next morning, as I sat leisurely on a sofa drinking coffee, my phone rang. It was Jackson. Early in the morning, calls from Jackson came every few minutes. The barrage of messages was intense. Even though I saw the messages, I didn't respond at all, so he must have switched to calling out of impatience. Sighing, I answered the phone to Jackson, ranting rapidly. "Hey, what are you doing? The funeral's about to start." "Oh, really? That has nothing to do with me." Jackson was furious at my casual response. "What? Stop messing around and get here now. I thought you went home because you disappeared from the wake, but then you just vanished." I calmly replied to the frantic Jackson. That's impossible. There's rush hour traffic, and it's over a 2-hour drive by car. I sent a photo I took through the window to Jackson's phone, and he yelled, "Where the hell are you?" "I'm at a hotel in the next city. I've always wanted to try their breakfast buffet. Food made by someone else is the best." "You're skipping a family funeral to stay at a hotel? Are you out of your mind?" I coldly replied to the barking Jackson. "Well, I'm not family, am I? Just a maid. I have no obligation to attend the funeral." Jackson fell silent then. After a short silence, he told my mother-in-law and Benjamin, "Mom, Benjamin, just wait here for a bit." Footsteps echoed. It seemed like they were moving down the hallway of the funeral venue. Eventually, the footsteps stopped, and Jackson spoke again. "First off, give me your bank account number." "What? Why?" "We need to pay for the funeral service, don't we?" "So you're saying I should cover it because you misused funds?" After a moment of being speechless, Jackson yelled in desperation, "That's right. I know you've been hoarding it. You can easily spare something like $20,000, can't you? If I give it to you, it'll never come back, right? Deal with it yourself." "How dare you speak to me like that?" Over the phone, I could sense Jackson's panic. A wife should just silently obey her husband. A wife isn't a slave. I sneered at Jackson. Anyway, why don't you just be honest with your mom? She's soft on you, so she might just give it to you easily. My words made Jackson's voice shrink. "That's impossible. If she found out I spent the funeral money on a woman, she'd definitely get mad." I smirked. Even he's afraid of his mother. Serves you right. It's your own fault. I'm busy, so I'm hanging up now. Jackson was still shouting something, but I hung up. If he's too embarrassed to say it himself, I'll pass the message along to him. Sharing the info about him spending the donation on a woman in the family's shared social media will surely catch Benjamin and my mother-in-law's eye. After that, Jackson called me incessantly, so in frustration, I dashed to the mobile shop. "How can I help you?" "I want to cancel my phone plan now." "Sure." Canceling my phone and changing my number filled me with a sense of relief. Returning to the hotel, I wandered the nearby streets with a leisurely feeling. Ever since getting married, I had to report my outing plans and return time to Jackson, and there were even times he'd call "come home soon." I never thought much of it before, but looking back, it was a terrible constraint. Jackson must be flustered not being able to contact me by now. Serves him right. I'll ignore him forever. Wrapped in a refreshing sense of freedom, I enjoyed shopping at my leisure. One day, I visited a church. My mother-in-law had mentioned that they were holding the service on the previous Sunday morning. I confirmed Jackson's car was parked in the parking lot. Likely, the other cars parked alongside it belonged to relatives. I opened the gate and stepped on the cobblestone path leading to the main hall. Listening closely, I could hear the murmur of casual conversation. The service had ended, and it seemed everyone was relaxing while having a chat. "Hello everyone, it's been a while." As I opened the entrance door and greeted them, the room fell silent for a moment before a wave of reproachful voices erupted. "Madison! Skipping both the wake and the funeral, what were you thinking? It was your husband's father's funeral, for heaven's sake. Your own father has already passed, so he was practically your real parent." I flashed a cold smile. "Well, I've been officially designated as the maid, you see." While I tossed out this sarcastic remark and glanced at Jackson, he was glaring at me with furious eyes. "I did my best to serve your father and mother. I even tried to fulfill the role of Benjamin's mother to the best of my ability." I looked over my mother-in-law, Jackson, and Benjamin in turn and shrugged. "But according to Jackson, I'm just a maid. A mere maid shouldn't attend the funeral, right?" So, I refrained. "I never said such a thing." Jackson's voice cracked. I exhaled softly and pressed the play button on my phone's recording app. The conversation I had overheard on the stairs filled the quiet lounge with loud volume. As Jackson turned pale, I pressed on. By the way, now that the funeral's over, did my mother-in-law end up covering the donation? What? As the relatives looked bewildered, Jackson and my mother-in-law exchanged glances before awkwardly averting their eyes. No, well, you see, Madison, what are you talking about? It's impossible to spend $20,000 in one night. Don't talk nonsense. Jackson attempted a forced laugh in front of me as I swiped through my phone. I found this. Are you familiar with this person? To boldly show their face like this, quite fearless, aren't they? The image I showed froze Jackson. It was a photo of a woman snuggled up close to a man. Though their eyes were hidden, the man was dressed in a dark suit and black tie. Furthermore, the woman had commented, "Happy to have my dear Jackson drop by during the wake. Choosing a date with me over saying goodbye to his dad, I'm so happy. He even bought me the $20,000 bag I've been wanting at the brand shop. Isn't it cute?" As Jackson reached out to snatch the phone, I kept it out of his reach, holding it high for the relatives at the back to see. I searched for this Charlotte person on social media, just going through everything. You can't pretend it's a coincidence with all these details matching up, right? Realizing excuses were futile, Jackson shut his mouth, a frightened expression on his face. Even Benjamin, usually his father's defender, was at a loss for words. The relatives began to condemn Jackson in unison. Leaving the wake under the pretext of retrieving something, just to meet your mistress. Shameful. Previously silent relatives couldn't hold back any longer and erupted in anger. You bought a brand bag with the donation money. Rushing out before the funeral started must have been to withdraw money from the bank. What a disgrace of a son. Shut up. It was our first date in a month. And since Mom covered the money, it's all good now. Jackson retorted defensively. To me, a date is more important than a funeral. If I skipped it and got dumped, it would be a huge problem. Cut me some slack. Even my mother-in-law was taken aback by this. Jackson, how could you say such a thing? Well, it's just an honest opinion, isn't it? Smiling, I spread out Benjamin's bankbook in front of everyone. Given he shamelessly claims dating is more important than his father, it's no wonder he'd accidentally use his son's savings, right? Benjamin, peering over, soon looked utterly defeated. It's empty. This has to be a joke. He turned to Jackson, accusing him fiercely. Did you use my savings, Dad? You're the only one who knew the PIN. You knew I've been saving up my money since Mom was around, didn't you? Jackson, shamelessly smiling, responded. Well, I tried to use Madison's money, but didn't know the PIN. You had saved quite a bit, huh? That's my boy. Don't mess around. Is that what a father does? Benjamin screamed, tears in his eyes. I don't want to call you my father anymore. I'm disowning you right here. My mother-in-law tried to calm the enraged Benjamin. Benjamin, forgive him. Thanks to your dad, we get to eat delicious food every day, don't we? Giving your dad your pocket money isn't such a big deal. My money, too, probably went to his mistress, right? It's fine to give gifts, but use your own money. Why are you touching mine? Benjamin voiced a very valid question. And the same goes for Granddad's funeral. After all the bad-mouthing, trying to get the money covered by someone else makes no sense. Pay it yourself. What's not there can't be given, I said, looking at Jackson, and chuckled softly. Judging by the social media, you've been giving her expensive gifts every time you meet, right? The reason you divorced your previous wife was also because of your infidelity, wasn't it? Pointing this out, Jackson and my mother-in-law were left speechless with uncomfortable expressions. It seemed Benjamin hadn't been told any of this. What a nasty woman. Did you even research the cause of our divorce? I snorted at Jackson's discomfort. I just thought I'd learn about your past, so I contacted your best friend through an acquaintance. Then, I stumbled upon some interesting stories. Just then, my phone buzzed with a message, so I stood up. Excuse me for a moment. I have to welcome a guest. I left the lounge and headed to the entrance. Returning to the main hall with a couple in tow, Jackson gasped. Lucas! And Charlotte too! Sorry, Jackson. I ended up spilling everything to Lucas. Charlotte looked downcast, while Lucas was visibly furious. Lucas, calm down. You're misunderstanding. We weren't having an affair, okay? It's no use, Jackson. I spoke with a look of disbelief. Lucas, I found your and Charlotte's text exchanges on the phone. I had a detective agency thoroughly investigate. So, no escaping this one. Lucas stared straight at Jackson with bloodshot eyes. Even though you have a bad history with women, I trusted you because you were my best friend. I never imagined you'd secretly meet her at a hotel the day after we went drinking. And then, you kept sneaking into my house while I was away on business trips, didn't you? With veins bulging at his temples, Lucas yelled resentfully. I should never have introduced her to you. Come on, my encounter with Charlotte was fate. Jackson said, grinning smugly. I'm more suitable for Charlotte than you ever could be. What? Keep your dreams for your sleep. That's ridiculous, right? Jackson pouted. I got stuck with a plain, older woman, while you marry a young and cute one. Plus, Charlotte said she fell in love with me at first sight. Jackson laughed out loud while Lucas clenched his fists. As you wish, I'll divorce Charlotte. Expect a lawsuit for alimony, and be ready to pay. I don't have that kind of money. I've already spent a lot on Charlotte, and just paying my ex-wife was hard enough. Jackson said defiantly. Well, I'll pay with the inheritance from Dad. Right, Mom? Jackson beamed, but my mother-in-law murmured softly. There's no such thing. Huh? If we had money, we wouldn't have moved into your place but renovated our old house and lived there. My mother-in-law spoke with a grim face. I nodded in agreement. My mother-in-law's decision to live together wasn't by choice but due to unavoidable circumstances. But you had savings for retirement, didn't you? Jackson showed panic, to which my mother-in-law sadly shook her head. After retiring, your father spent it all on horse racing. He even gambled away the pension, covering the shortfall with loans. So, there's no inheritance. Jackson turned pale and shrieked. No way, give me a break. I moved in with you guys thinking I'd get a hefty inheritance. My mother-in-law's face darkened with anger. You were planning this all along? Of course. Otherwise, why would I bother calling you parents over? It's annoying. Jackson said irritably. All the living expenses I've covered, just wasted. It's like throwing it down the drain. Disappointment appeared on my mother-in-law's face. Is money all you think about? It's my dad's fault, can't help it. Charlotte smirked, having listened to the whole exchange. I went out with you because you graduated from a better university and worked for a renowned company than Lucas did. What a disappointment. Approaching the stiffened Jackson, she declared firmly. Thanks for all the lavish gifts. Bye now. What? Hey! We're not done talking yet, Charlotte. Lucas chased after her, heading out the door. Poor thing, got dumped, huh? No inheritance, and your affair partner turns her back on you. Talk about a double whammy. I gave Jackson a sympathetic smile. Paying alimony to both Lucas and me seems like it's going to be tough for you. Well, good luck with that. Hey, Madison, wait! Jackson tried to stop me with a domineering tone as I was about to leave. How are you going to live if you divorce me with your meager salary? I don't necessarily want a divorce. If you keep doing the housework, I don't mind keeping you around as before. I exploded in anger at Jackson's arrogance. Enough already. Who do you think you are? My outburst surprised Jackson, Benjamin, and my mother-in-law, who all froze in shock. That house is mine, isn't it? I'm the one who's been letting you three stay there. And let me tell you, It was because of me doing all the housework that the house was running smoothly. Don't you understand that? Madison, calm down. After all the ridicule, you don't even understand that much? Your intelligence is as expected. My sneering at Jackson caused laughter to break out among the relatives. I've been offered to return to my previous job as a full-time employee. I can live just fine on my own. Maybe you should worry about your debt-ridden self? Yeah, Dad. We're in a worse situation. Benjamin also tried to stop me in a panic. Come on, we're family, right? If you become a full-time employee, contribute your salary to the household. We're going bankrupt at this rate. Benjamin's pathetic plea was echoed by my mother-in-law. Running away, even though you're just a wife? Help us out for once. I turned back to the three of them with a cold remark. Have you forgotten how you've treated me until now? There's no place for a maid in this. Madison! Family of three, please help each other out. And I'll be expecting you to move out of the house promptly. I left the church. Returning to the hotel, I sent Jackson the signed divorce papers. I plan to live in the hotel until those three move out. Though they left quietly, Jackson kept stalling on the alimony payments. I wanted to reconcile, but she pushed for the divorce, was his excuse. Convinced by the lawyer that a court divorce would cost extra, and is it really worth it, a pale-faced Jackson finally gave in and transferred the alimony to my account. To pay the alimony to me, he had to take on more debt and even started working part-time jobs since his salary wasn't enough. Jackson apparently told his boss and co-workers that the divorce was due to irreconcilable differences. However, since Lucas's friend worked in a different department, the true reason spread throughout the company. Feeling uncomfortable, Jackson quit his job as if fleeing. Naturally, his income plummeted. Now, he's juggling multiple part-time jobs, desperately trying to pay off his debts. Despite once being so close, the family relations have deteriorated. Benjamin has become thoroughly rebellious, skipping school and barely showing up at the shabby apartment the three of them moved into, choosing instead to hang out and waste time. My mother-in-law has not forgiven Jackson for agreeing to live together with inheritance in mind and now refuses to even speak to him. The incident of stealing Lucas's wife spread like wildfire among friends, and Jackson, having lost all his friends, is leading a lonely life. Having returned to my previous job as a full-time employee, I'm working full-time without having to worry about anyone else, enjoying my life alone. Only now do I fully realize how difficult living with those three had been. From now on, I plan to work while taking care of my health and savoring the rest of my life to the fullest. Ta-da! Surprise! Mom's coming along with us. That's what my excited husband announced as his voice echoed through the entryway. Ignoring my cheerful husband and mother-in-law, I couldn't hide my surprise. And no wonder. Because the trip my husband mentioned Mom would be joining us on was our honeymoon. Confused about what he was saying, my husband's face turned into a pout of dissatisfaction. What's the matter? Aren't you happy? Happy was the last thing I was. He should have known that. Especially since my relationship with my mother-in-law was the worst, something I had complained about bitterly. It seemed she couldn't forgive me for stealing her precious son. Whenever she saw me, she would pile on the sarcasm as much as she could. The annoying part was, she never showed that side of herself in front of my husband. She was thoroughly playing the role of the good mother-in-law. Perhaps because of that, even when I confided in my husband about being mistreated, he hardly believed me. But still, he should have been well aware of my discomfort around his mother. Despite that, he went ahead and planned this. What was he thinking? Wait a minute. It's the day of, isn't it? There's no way we can get plane tickets or a hotel at this point. Of course, I hadn't booked anything for my mother-in-law. It was absurd to think we could get her on board without reservations, especially during peak travel season. Explaining that to him, my husband snorted as if it were obvious. Well then, give me all your tickets. I'll go with Mom. He reached out his hand as if it was the most natural thing in the world, leaving me speechless with disbelief. What on earth was he thinking? This wasn't just any trip. It was our honeymoon. Who in the world goes on their honeymoon with their mother? Well, I wouldn't want to go on any trip with this mother-in-law either. As I stood there with my mouth agape, my mother-in-law wore a triumphant look. She must have been so proud that her son chose her first. Come on, hurry up. I paid for it, so it shouldn't matter, right? He thinks just because he paid for the trip, he can do whatever he wants. That's when it hit me. Speaking of which, about the cost of this trip. My name is Grace. I'm 28 years old and work for my father's company. At the start, there were many who questioned my qualifications due to nepotism, but as I diligently worked and started producing results, I gradually began to hear people appreciating my efforts. Despite this, simply because I am the CEO's daughter, there are still those who speak ill of me behind my back, and sometimes their cruel words do hurt. The one who supported me through these challenges was my husband, Lucas. Lucas is the same age as me, and since we were assigned to the same team, we quickly became close and started confiding in each other. It didn't take long for us to begin dating. Lucas, who was adept at his job and significantly contributed to our achievements, was highly regarded by my father, who was all for our marriage when we announced it. So, you're Lucas, huh? I've heard a lot about you. I'm entrusting my daughter to you. Yes, I'll make sure she's happy. I fondly remember watching their exchange back then. At that time, my father was contemplating handing over the company and had discussed it with the other executives, leading to widespread speculation that Lucas might be the next CEO. The idea of my marriage seemed to present an opportunity for my father to consider a transition of leadership within the company. Having someone from within the family, especially someone as competent as Lucas, take over the business was probably not something my father was entirely against. I've never been one to seek the limelight, so the thought of my skilled husband taking over was nothing short of ideal for me. That's probably what everyone, including my father, was thinking. However, when we had dinner together, he often spoke about the mindset required for running a business, suggesting what might eventually come to pass. Lucas's father had already passed away, and his mother was living alone. Lucas dearly loved his mother, always ready to rush to her aid whenever she needed help, even during our dates. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for being raised single-handedly by her and would apologetically express his desire to repay her, which I would support with a smile. Seeing how much he cared for his mother made me think, what a wonderful man he is. I felt proud to be dating such a person. However, after we got married and started living together, I began to notice things that made me question. I'm going to see my mom for a bit. That sentence had become almost a catchphrase for him. And he was visiting his mother almost every week. Is your mom feeling ill? I would ask out of concern, but it seemed that was not the case. Grace, you don't need to worry. Everyone needs some alone time, right? Initially, he would reassure me with those words and a gentle pat on the head, but even that had stopped recently. One Saturday morning, as Lucas was cheerfully getting ready to leave, I asked him, "Hey, are you going to her place today?" Upon hearing this, his previously cheerful demeanor immediately changed, and he let out a heavy sigh. Why do you have to say it like that? His words made me flinch. I realized too late that my tone might have sounded accusatory. He turned around and glared at me. It can't be helped. She's all alone at home. You understand I'm just checking in on her because you're not comfortable, right? His words made me step back. Yes, I was uneasy around her. It wasn't always like that. After all, she was the mother of the man I loved. I initially thought I should cherish my husband's mother just as much as he does. That was my initial intention. But it turns out, just because you feel a certain way doesn't mean the other person will feel the same towards you. My mother-in-law seemed to view me as a cat burglar who stole her son away. Ever since we met, she's been seizing every opportunity when Lucas isn't around to throw snide remarks my way. It happened for the first time when I went to greet her. Lucas had left to use the bathroom, and as soon as the sound of his footsteps faded, her demeanor changed completely. From her previously pleasant expression, she looked me up and down as if appraising me, her gaze cold and assessing. "Humph, I don't care if you're some CEO's daughter or whatever, you're nothing special." Before I could even recover from the shock, she continued with her venomous words. "To think you'd have the nerve to show your face after stealing Lucas from me. I don't accept you at all. Make no mistake about it." She sneered at me, then loudly slurped her tea in a vulgar manner. Naturally, she hadn't offered any tea to me. Mom? Don't call me Mom. It's creepy." I wondered why someone I was meeting for the first time would harbor such hostility towards me. Despite my attempts to speak up, I was immediately shut down by her. As I stood there confused, I could hear Lucas returning from the bathroom. And just like that, she flipped back to her pleasant facade, offering me tea as if she had just remembered. "Oh, dear, I'm so sorry. I haven't even served you tea." She laughed lightly, and Lucas, upon returning, gave a wry smile. "What's the matter, Mom? You haven't served tea yet? Such a lovely young lady, Lucas. I can't believe I forgot to serve tea," she said, her face breaking into a kindly smile. "I'd be delighted if you felt comfortable enough to call me Mom. I felt a chill run down my spine. Ever since then, she's been consistently nasty to me whenever Lucas isn't around. It's like dealing with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Lucas seems oblivious to the malice his mother shows only to me. Whenever I couldn't bear it and tried to talk to him about it, he'd stubbornly insist that his mom could never say such things. "If it bothers you that much, you don't have to see her." He looked disappointed, not believing a word I said. I used to plead my case fervently. But eventually, I gave up trying to clear up the misunderstanding, seeing as he always took his mother's side. So, I took Lucas at his word and started avoiding visits to my in-laws. Unless it was absolutely necessary. To Lucas, it must seem like I simply detest his precious mother for no reason. "Just make sure to lock up, okay?" he said today, too, heading out to see her without looking back at me. My hand stretched out to him, grasping at the air. Lucas's back blurs through my tears. On the days we fight over his mother, Lucas doesn't come home. It feels like he's showing me that his mother is more important to him than his wife, me. If it weren't for issues with his mother, Lucas would be a great husband. When work isn't going well for me, he's quick to notice and offer support, and even though he often works late, he helps with the household chores without complaint. Thinking that at least he says I don't have to see her makes me feel slightly better, I mutter to myself while looking through travel brochures. I shake my head and decide to focus on the plan in front of me. It's the planning for our much-anticipated honeymoon. During this honeymoon, I won't have to think about his mother at all. At least, there won't be any chance of Lucas being called away by her. While considering the increase in Lucas's overtime due to his involvement in a big project, I daydream about where we could go. Maybe we should splurge a bit. As I flip through the pages, the temptation arises, but I immediately hold back. "Since I've left all the planning to you, at least let me pay for it from my account," he said, refusing to listen to my protests that we should pay together, and just laughed. If it's just him paying, I shouldn't spend too much. Besides, I don't want to give his mother any more material for her snide remarks by appearing as a spendthrift CEO's daughter. With that thought, I let out a wry smile. Just when I decided to focus, I find myself thinking about his mother again. "Ah, stop it." To change my mood, I put aside the brochure and start preparing dinner for Lucas, who will be home soon. And then, the morning of our honeymoon arrives. As I'm busy preparing, the doorbell rings. "Coming." Being near the door, I open it without checking the intercom, only to be taken aback. "Mom." There stands his mother, in flashy clothes with a large suitcase. Hearing my voice, Lucas peeks out. "You're early, Mom." He greets her cheerfully, while she doesn't even glance at me, leaving me alternating looks between them in confusion. "Early? What do you mean?" Despite it being the day we're supposed to leave for our honeymoon, I'm puzzled by her large luggage. Is she planning to stay at our place while we're away? Confused, Lucas turns to me with a smile very much like his mother's. Tada! Surprise! Mom's coming with us on the honeymoon. What? Stunned, I let out a foolish noise as Lucas claps his hands in excitement. What on earth is he talking about? Wait a minute! What do you mean? Like I said, Mom's joining us on our honeymoon. Seeing my confusion, Lucas narrows his lips and cheerfully hugs his mother's shoulder. If we're going on a trip, I thought it'd be nice for Mom to join us. Watching her son express this happiness, my mother-in-law turns a smug look towards me. No, wait a minute. I press my temples in confusion and ask for clarification. This is our honeymoon, right? Honeymoons are supposed to be for the couple. I could understand inviting important family members, but shouldn't we at least discuss it first? Am I wrong? I can't be wrong, right? Yet, why are they looking at me as if my words are foreign? He made me question whether Lucas understands me at all. To make matters worse, as I struggle, my mother-in-law starts to hum a tune, clearly pleased by my discomfort. Why do we have to argue like this on what should be the joyful day of our honeymoon? And a surprise? What kind of surprise is this on the day of the trip? What's the big deal? I paid for it, so it should be fine, says Lucas, noticing my shock and frowning. No, it's not fine. Was his offer to pay for the trip not out of consideration for me, but to ensure I couldn't complain about his mother coming along? Wait, you can't just spring this on me all of a sudden. It's obviously not possible, I say, my disbelief growing. My sigh of frustration only makes Lucas and his mother more upset. What do you mean, not possible? Oh dear, you don't want to travel with me, she says, putting on a distressed face as if she's the victim, while Lucas adds in with a similarly troubled voice. My headache only intensifies. It's not about wanting or not wanting. Lucas, did you book a flight for your mom? What about the hotel? I inquire, and Lucas looks at me puzzled. Huh? We can just book that now. That's impossible. Do you realize how many months in advance we've made our reservations? I can't help but raise my voice at his lack of planning. Could he really have thought it would all work out, even on the day? Despite intending not to go overboard, the hotel we booked is fairly upscale. Especially now during peak travel season. There's no way flights or hotel rooms are available, I argue, and Lucas, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, extends his hand to me. Then give me all your tickets. What? I'm so taken aback I have to ask him to repeat himself, and Lucas does, more irritably. Just give me your tickets if there's no room for Mom. It's an order from me, who's paying for the trip. Seeing my mother-in-law's triumphant face makes everything go dark before me. What? What does he mean? What am I being told? Since Mom went through all the trouble to prepare, I'll be going on this trip with her. We can go on another trip just you and me later, that's fine, right? Lucas's reasoning, prioritizing his mother as naturally as breathing, leaves me unable to comprehend. Or does he think that going on a separate trip with me later will smooth things over? I've said it before, but this is our honeymoon. Ours, mine and Lucas's. And now, he expects me to just hand it over to his mother, who showed up out of the blue with some surprise I know nothing about. Mom went through all the trouble to prepare? I couldn't care less. If he wants to smooth things over, he should be sending his mother home, not telling his wife to give up. Yet, here Lucas is, telling me to give up, and I'm utterly dismayed. Actually, I was going to keep quiet about this, but I press my aching head and let out a heavy sigh. The trip expenses? My dad is covering them. You haven't paid, and you have no right to demand my tickets. When I reveal this, Lucas's expression turns to one of confusion. That makes sense. He thought he had paid, which is why he felt so bold. Why would the CEO do such a thing? Lucas starts to sweat as I give him a cold look. The honeymoon money was a gift from him, telling us to save it for our future. He even said to keep quiet about it, probably to protect Lucas's pride. Why didn't you say anything? Lucas yells, his face turning red with the shock of the revelation. My mother-in-law, too, probably didn't expect my father to be the one paying. She starts to fidget nervously. Watching Lucas rant, I feel my affection for him cooling rapidly. I've had enough of his mother's snide remarks and his prioritizing her over everything. If it's just the two of you going, you'll need to return the money to my dad, and I'll cancel the reservations. Go on your trip with your own money. I shake off Lucas and his mother's frantic attempts to stop me, grab my packed bags, and leave the house. This is no joke. Using my father's money for such a mother-son affair? Over my dead body. Thanks to being tasked with all the preparations due to their busy schedules, I had made all the reservations under my name, so I start making cancellation calls while getting into the taxi I had called. Instead of heading to the planned airport, I give the driver my parents' address, and with confusion, he drives off. Arriving home with my luggage on what was supposed to be my honeymoon, my father is astoundingly surprised. But as I recount the story, his anger flares up like wildfire. What is that? Are they joking? The incessant calls from Lucas only fuel my father's rage. And my own too. Talking to my father solidifies my resolve. Dad, I think I want to get a divorce. After I made my declaration, my dad calmed his anger and gently supported me. Without saying whether it was good or bad, he soothingly rubbed my back, providing warmth. I'm sorry, Dad. I blurted out, tears accompanying my words. I could see Dad's other hand, not around my back, clenched tightly in response. The next day, Lucas came to my parents' house with a box of confectionery, intending to apologize. I wanted to refuse him entry, but my dad stopped me. If we're considering divorce, a discussion is necessary. I want to hear his true intentions directly. Let him in for now. I had thought about consulting a lawyer, but since Dad suggested otherwise, I relented. Upon opening the door, Lucas, noticing my dad, quickly apologized. Seeing Lucas act meekly in front of my dad irritated me. As Lucas continued to show his remorse, Dad prompted me to lead him to the parlor. I deeply apologize for causing such a disturbance. Lucas apologized again. Accustomed to apologies through work, his flawless posture was almost sickening. What is this apology even for? Dad sighed, seemingly for the umpteenth time. I felt the same. Lucas said he was sorry for causing a disturbance. A disturbance, that's all. Not once did he apologize for what he said to me. This is beyond insulting. Cutting off Lucas's attempt to say something else, I presented a piece of paper. The divorce papers. Do you know how to fill them out? I've already done mine, for your reference. I conveyed this deliberately politely, shocking Lucas, who hadn't expected divorce papers to come into play, his face turning ashen. Wait, Grace, please! Divorce, you can't be serious! For the first time since arriving, Lucas seemed to genuinely look at me. To him, I was always secondary. It shouldn't matter to you, right, Lucas? You have your mother, after all. If that's his stance, I'll treat him as a business acquaintance, speaking to him with due courtesy. I have no intention of repairing this relationship. That sentiment needed to be clearly communicated. What are you talking about? Why bring up my mother now? She was looking forward to the trip too. We could always go on a trip, you and I, right? Astonishing. Lucas has not grasped why I was so angry and left. We could always go? What are you talking about? It was supposed to be our honeymoon. My body shakes uncontrollably, and I gently press my right hand against it to steady myself. My lips, pressed tightly together, hurt. What kind of husband tries to take his mother on a honeymoon planned by his wife? Expressing it out loud only makes me feel more pathetic. Yet, Lucas, as if to rub salt in the wound, insists further. But, that's why I initially tried to take her with us. You're the one who said there were no flights for Mom, or that hotels couldn't be booked, right, Grace? Think about it logically. There's no way we could book anything on the day itself. I can't believe it. He is serious. Amidst my confusion, anger surfaces as he genuinely yells that I am the one at fault. And you're telling me to send my mom back when she was looking forward to it so much? Lucas's near-aggressive outburst is quietly halted by my dad. That's enough. Stop it. My dad, who had been silently listening, shakes his head in dismay. Lucas, I'm disappointed in you. Suddenly regaining his composure at those words, Lucas straightens up quickly. My dad looks at him with a sad gaze. Why did you prioritize your mother over Grace in that situation? No, well... Pressed by my dad, Lucas starts sweating. He might be able to argue back at me, but he can't do the same with my dad. A honeymoon is for the couple to go on. You could have gone on any trip with your mother later. Was everything you said about cherishing my daughter a lie? It's not a lie. I just wanted to cherish my mother as well. Lucas's spontaneous outcry is met with my dad's first glare. So, you're fine with Grace getting hurt? Lucas falls silent, visibly straining. I'm so sorry. He was mumbling an apology in a trembling voice. But his clenched fist seemed to scream of humiliation. He's apologizing because he has to. Not because he wants to. He probably doesn't think he's done anything wrong. He's just apologizing because my dad, the CEO, is angry, that's all. Lucas, you're a capable worker. My dad says, making Lucas feel relieved, thinking perhaps he's forgiven, but he quickly realizes his mistake. A gaze colder than a midwinter lake pierces Lucas. But no matter how good you are at your job, I can't trust someone who doesn't value his family. My dad hands him a pen, causing Lucas to tremble. Wait, please. Not divorce. I'll change, I promise. Lucas refuses to take the pen, so my dad forces it into his hand. You shouldn't be apologizing to me. Now Lucas starts clinging to me. Grace, please say something. I'm begging you. Please don't divorce me. Lucas pleads, coming to my feet and looking up at me as he clings to my legs, trying to escape from my dad's judgment. I'll prioritize you from now on. I'm beyond tears now. His words are laced with disrespect towards me. Please! If we get divorced, I won't be able to pay off my debts. Seeing that neither my dad nor I are nodding in agreement, Lucas blurts out in desperation. Debt? What's that? As I look down at his disheveled head, repeating the word I've heard for the first time, Lucas jumps back in surprise. He clearly had let it slip accidentally. He covers his mouth as if he said too much. Well, that... My dad and I demand the whole story with just a look, and Lucas finally begins to speak, resigned. The truth is... The truth he hesitantly shares is enough to make both my dad and me hold our heads in our hands. It turns out Lucas and his mother had been living extravagantly, believing that the CEO position and its perks were guaranteed to fall into their lap. The reason Lucas had been going back to his mother's house every week was to squander money together. There's even less reason to keep you married now. My dad says with utter disdain, Lucas finally showing a genuine gesture of apology. Please wait. If we get divorced, I don't know what I'll do tomorrow. His repeated apologies are almost comical, like a toy I've seen somewhere before. This has nothing to do with us. I say with a dry gaze, waiting for Lucas to sign the divorce papers. There's nothing more to say, so my dad and I quietly sip our coffee. Of course, without offering any to Lucas. Though the divorce papers were somewhat forced, the divorce was finalized smoothly. The lawyer my dad hired was extremely competent, and with the detailed diary I kept, negotiations proceeded smoothly. We even claimed additional compensation for the honeymoon trip I had to cancel, and though there was an attempt to negotiate the amount down through the lawyers, my dad dismissed it before I could respond, making me laugh when he told me about it. As for Lucas, he quit his job almost immediately after the divorce became known at his company, leaving hastily. With no significant severance pay and only a small amount of savings, he managed to pay the alimony and debt repayment, leading to a much more modest lifestyle, I was informed by the lawyer. And his mother, now bedridden, has been living off part-time jobs, reaching out to former colleagues asking for money. While it's unclear how much of this is true, it's become a humorous story at gatherings. As for me, encouraged by my dad and other employees, it looks like I'll be taking over as the next CEO. Though I've resisted, not wanting to be at the forefront, my dad convinced me, showing a rare moment of vulnerability by not wanting to leave the company in unreliable hands. Feeling responsible for causing my father such distress, I was initially reluctant. However, it seems I might have inherited his talent for management after all. With his support as chairman, our company's performance has been on the rise, even if only slightly. Thanks to gaining some confidence, I've been getting more attention at gatherings with other CEOs. I'm not thinking about new romance just yet, but maybe it's time to take the next step forward. Why does my son have to suffer like this? It should have been you in that accident. Upon hearing her son, Brandon, had been severely injured in a traffic accident, mother-in-law rushed to the hospital, her face twisted in anger and tears in her eyes, shouting these words. It seems that while Brandon's life isn't in danger, the injury's location is problematic, and there's a chance he might end up paralyzed from the waist down. Brandon is still so young. How is he supposed to live the rest of his life with such a disability? I wonder if I can be the support he needs. I was in a mess of shock and anxiety when my mother-in-law shouted abuse at me, and I was struck as if I had been hit over the head. Since that day, my relationship with mother-in-law has only deteriorated, with her giving me hostile glares whenever we see each other. One day, about a year after Brandon's accident, he suggested we move in with his parents. Perhaps he was considering my workload and the care I provide. But contrary to what I hoped, what Brandon said next was totally unexpected. I don't want to do this to you, I want to live with my mom. What do you mean? Actually, The story Brandon told was so shocking, I felt dizzy and nearly passed out. You've been so dedicated to me, you would understand, right? They seemed utterly convinced I would agree without hesitation. To think that Brandon would make such a selfish demand, I couldn't accept it. I decided then to seek revenge against them. My name is Hannah. I was over the moon when Brandon, whom I had been dating, proposed to me, making me a 27-year-old office worker at the peak of happiness. He was introduced by a friend, a coworker 2 years older than me. I felt that he was a wonderful person with strong decision-making skills, always leading the way in everything. After accepting his proposal, we began planning our wedding. That included house hunting, wedding preparations, and meeting each other's parents. Though balancing these tasks with work was challenging, the joy of preparing to start a life with my beloved boyfriend outweighed the hardships. My parents' greeting went smoothly, and next, we planned to meet Brandon's parents. Brandon had mentioned his parents were a remarried couple since his high school days, making him the child from my father-in-law's previous marriage. Though there's no blood relation to mother-in-law, they seem to have a good relationship. Mother-in-law, much younger than father-in-law, provides Brandon with a mix of parental and friendly advice, a confidant for anything. I was anxious about being accepted into such a tightly knit family, but my worries were for naught. When I visited to formally greet them about our marriage, my in-laws welcomed me warmly. It's so wonderful to have such a cute girl join our family. Hannah, we look forward to having you. If you ever encounter any trouble or feel uncertain, don't hesitate to rely on us. They said, welcoming me with open arms, and eased my nerves. They made me happy to join their mother-in-law. Brandon and I got married smoothly and have been living happily. However, our peaceful life came to an abrupt end about 2 years into our marriage, just as we started discussing building a home or having children. That day, as I was going about my usual work routine, I received a call from an unfamiliar phone number on my smartphone. Puzzled, I answered the phone, only to find out it was a call from a hospital near my home. Please, stay calm, the voice started, before delivering the shocking news. My husband, Brandon, had been seriously injured in a traffic accident. The moment I heard that, I was speechless, unable to comprehend the words. A traffic accident? Brandon seriously injured? My mind went blank at the utterly unexpected situation. I was snapped back to reality by the repeated calls of the nurse on the phone, and I hurriedly left work early to rush to the hospital where Brandon had been taken. By the time I arrived, Brandon's surgery had already finished. In the hospital room I was led to, he lay in bed, his body wrapped in bandages. The relief that he was alive, even if not unscathed, was fleeting. I was called into another room where the attending doctor delivered the cruel reality. Brandon had caused a single vehicle accident due to his own driving mistake, resulting in severe injuries. The surgery was successful, and his life was not in danger, but the injuries were such that there's a possibility he might end up paralyzed from the waist down. The moment I heard that, my mind went blank again. Brandon is in his early 30s. And yet, he must live the rest of his life in a wheelchair? Can I support him through this? With my emotions a tangled mess of shock and anxiety, I staggered back to Brandon's hospital room, where I found his parents, my in-laws, pale-faced. When they pressed me for details, I relayed everything the doctor had told me. As I spoke, mother-in-law's face turned red with anger, and the moment I finished, she yelled with a force as if about to attack. Why does Brandon have to go through this? It should have been you in that accident. Mother-in-law yelled, her face twisted in anger and tears in her eyes. The intense expression on her face, so unlike her usual gentle mother-in-law, struck me like a blow to the head. After being calmed down by father-in-law, mother-in-law left the room saying I need to cool off and didn't return for a while. Hannah, I'm sorry my wife said such terrible things. You must be upset too. She might say something again when she comes back, so maybe it's best for you to go home for today. You're looking quite pale yourself. Father-in-law said, showing concern for me, gratefully accepting his advice. I said, I'll come back tomorrow morning, and left. Even after I got home, mother-in-law's words and expression haunted me. Her attitude seemed to scream that she truly despised me. Whether she meant it or not, her words had cut deep. I can't take my husband's injuries upon myself, no matter how much I wish I could. If that's the case, the only thing I can do is support Brandon with all my heart. With that resolution, I begged my boss in HR the next day to let me work from home. It was because I had time to care for Brandon. I must secure the time to look after him. It's up to me to earn for us now. With that single-minded determination, I resolved to support Brandon, both financially and physically. The money I had been saving for when we might have kids, I used it all to buy care supplies for Brandon. I decided to dedicate my life to supporting him. Alone in our quiet home, without Brandon, I made this resolve. A year has passed since the accident. Brandon has been discharged from the hospital and continues his recovery at home, with me balancing work and his care. My relationship with mother-in-law has remained strained since that day. Every time she came to visit my husband, she would glare at me. Meanwhile, my father-in-law always had words of gratitude for me. Hannah, thank you for always taking such good care of Brandon. You have your own job to deal with, it must be hard. I can't thank you enough. Words like these from him always felt like a salvation to me. It seems mother-in-law is very worried about her son, as she visits him frequently. Brandon also enjoys his mother's visits, wanting to spend quality time just with her. Therefore, when she was around, I made it a point not to approach his room, going shopping or cooking instead. Then, one day, a shocking incident occurred. It was on a day she came to visit Brandon. As I was about to leave Brandon's room as usual, she unusually asked me to stay. Wait a moment. Hannah, there's something important I want to talk about, please come into the room. Oh. Yes, okay. I was surprised to be spoken to by her, let alone about something she deemed important. Entering Brandon's room with questions in my mind, Brandon and she exchanged looks before he began to speak. I've been thinking, how about we live at my parents' house? This sudden discussion about moving in with his parents came out of nowhere. We had never talked about living together before, so why bring it up all of a sudden? Thinking perhaps he was considering my workload, I quickly shook my head. I'm fine, really. I don't feel burdened by our current life, and moving in would just inconvenience your mother and father. But the next moment, Brandon's response was completely unexpected. No, it's not for you. I want to live with my mom. What do you mean? Confused, I turned to Brandon, who started explaining with a smile. Apparently, since high school when his mother remarried his father, he had been in a relationship with her. And when his mother came to visit, they would spend their time being affectionate with each other. Though they had been nurturing their love for over a decade, since Brandon and his mother were technically mother and son, marriage was out of the question. Having moved away from his parents' home after marrying me and feeling lonely over the years, plus becoming physically disabled after the accident made it so that his mother could only visit, putting a strain on her. However, if I agreed to live with his parents, Brandon could live with his mother, allowing them to see each other anytime. That's why he wanted us to move in with his parents. My husband's eyes sparkled as if to say, wasn't it a great suggestion? If you, Hannah, who have devoted so much to me, can understand, right? But keep this a secret from my husband, okay? It'd be trouble if he wants to divorce me. I was dumbfounded by their assumption that I would simply agree. The shock was so immense I couldn't find my voice. Unable to bear the expectant looks and the isn't it good, pressure for a response, I fled from Brandon's room. I ran out of the house aimlessly. The fact that Brandon and his mother had been betraying me for years, even before our marriage, plunged me into despair. If he loved her so much, why did he marry me? What am I supposed to believe? Tears streaming down my face as I ran, eventually, I was too tired to continue and stopped. Just then, I found myself near a park, so I decided to sit on a bench to calm down. As I rested there, taking deep breaths, I began to feel more at peace and remembered something important I had to check. So, that's what it was. After confirming it, I quietly resolved to get a divorce. At the same time, I decided to contact his father. Judging by mother-in-law's tone, it seemed he was unaware of their affair. I thought he had the right to know the truth, and that he should be informed. With that in mind, I invited father-in-law to a coffee shop nearby after his work. I'm sorry to bother you after a long day at work. Actually, there's something I need to discuss with you about your wife and Brandon. Sensing the seriousness of the situation, he encouraged me to speak. To him, I showed what I had confirmed in the park earlier. It was footage from a nanny cam I had installed in Brandon's room. I had set it up after he started recuperating at home, fearing something might happen while I was out shopping. This camera had recording and playback functions, as well as a two-way talk feature. Interestingly, I had only used it to check live footage when away, so Brandon seemed unaware of its recording capabilities. In front of father-in-law, I played back the video recorded by the nanny cam. It captured the moment Brandon proposed living together, their previous discussions about moving in, and even a kiss scene. Brandon and mother-in-law were mocking us, calling me and father-in-law clueless fools, laughing about how I, being so obedient to Brandon, would silently consent to their relationship and plans to live together. The footage I saw in the park was appalling, and it felt just as terrible watching it again. And that's why I want to divorce Brandon, I said, looking at father-in-law after the playback ended. He, who had been staring at the smartphone screen where the video had been playing, was expressionless. I see. Actually, I have something I wanted to show you too, he said, pulling out some documents from his bag. They were the results of a private investigation he had ordered on. Since the accident, mother-in-law had been going out more frequently under the pretext of visiting Brandon. He found it suspicious and wondered if she was having an affair. Given her frequent visits were true, the investigation documents likely mentioned it. Flipping through the documents, I found unexpectedly shocking results. Sharing the nanny cam footage and the private investigator's findings with father-in-law, we headed to the house where Brandon and mother-in-law were likely still together. As expected, they were in Brandon's room, being affectionate. Upon our arrival, they both turned pale and stiffened, realizing something was up. "I'm back. Sorry, but I've told everything to Dad."
No! You can't possibly believe this, right? I love Brandon as a mother loves her son, nothing more. You're the only one I love as a man,
she said, forcing a smile. Father-in-law, giving her a cold look, replied, "I've had enough of lies. I saw the nanny cam footage. I saw everything, how you two acted like lovers, and how you planned to deceive Hannah into agreeing." "What?" Brandon exclaimed, looking at the nanny cam in shock. Realizing he knew everything, Brandon and his mother began frantically apologizing.
"I'm sorry, Hannah, Dad. I somehow ended up truly loving Mom. I knew it was wrong towards Dad, but I couldn't help my feelings. I'm really sorry. I do love Brandon, but the one I love the most is you. So, please forgive us. And Hannah, please keep being good to Brandon, okay?"
Regardless of my husband, the apology from her felt like nothing more than an excuse, which disgusted me. Father-in-law seemed to feel the same, his face contorting with discomfort. Facing my pleading husband and his mother, I spat out my decision harshly. "I don't ever want to see your faces again. I'll be divorcing Brandon." My statement left my husband speechless. Then, as though speaking on his behalf, she interjected. "Divorce? Don't joke around. Who's going to take care of Brandon?" She, showing no signs of repentance and snapping back, prompted father-in-law to sharply retort. "You can take care of him. We're getting divorced, so you can stay by Brandon's side as much as you want." "Divorce? Why would you say such a thing? Didn't I tell you I love you?" She continued to scream, refusing to accept father-in-law's decision for divorce. Realizing that talking with them would lead nowhere, I quietly left to start packing, intending to leave the house. As I began to sort through my belongings in the living room, my husband's shout came from the bedroom, "Don't mess with me." Shocked by his outburst, I peered into the bedroom to find him, his face now flushed with anger, a stark contrast to his earlier pallor.
"What's this about you having another man? Explain."
It appears that in my absence, father-in-law had shown them the detective's report. I, too, was taken aback by the detective's findings. Surprisingly, the report revealed that she had another affair partner besides my husband. According to the report, she met this man after my husband's accident, and she would use the excuse of visiting my husband to instead meet her lover 1 out of every 3 times. Father-in-law had begun to consider divorce upon discovering from the detective that she frequently left the house under the pretext of visiting my husband. However, if it comes to divorce, it might add an additional emotional burden to my husband, who is already suffering physically from the accident. He had been cautious, however, about when and how to confront her. But with the revelation of her affair with my husband, father-in-law saw no reason to hesitate any longer and decided to confront both of them with the evidence. She became frantic, desperately making excuses. But I was lonely because we couldn't be intimate after Brandon became disabled from the accident. I was planning to end it with him once Brandon got better. Her excuses only incited my husband's anger further. "What? So to you, I was just a body?"
"No, that's not it. But that's a separate issue."
"What? Don't spout such nonsense." Their argument escalated, father-in-lawing the house with their shouting. Leaving them to their furious exchange, father-in-law and I departed from the house. Subsequently, through lawyers, both Brandon and I, as well as father-in-law and mother-in-law, finalized our divorces. Once the affair came to light, mother-in-law's other lover vanished. Despite previously contemplating separation, Brandon, now divorced from me, realized he would be left without anyone to care for him if his mother also left his side. Under a promise of no further affairs, their relationship appears to continue to this day. Wanting to ensure he had a place to live, my ex-husband demanded the house in the property division. I readily agreed, having no desire to continue living in a house father-in-law with such memories. In return, I received a larger share of our finances and secured a significant amount in alimony. As long as we have the house, we should be able to live somehow. The living expenses didn't seem to cost much anyway. At his grand misconception, I couldn't help but smirk internally. Until now, I had told him not to worry, saying that we could manage the living expenses with insurance money, disability pension, and a little income from working at home. In reality, it was me working desperately to earn money, but he, almost always bedridden, had no way of knowing. Because I managed our finances, my ex-husband and his mother were under the impression that living expenses weren't much and thought we had financial leeway. In fact, I had been barely managing the significant living expenses with my earnings, and I was also the one repaying the mortgage. Unaware of this, my naive ex-husband and his mother must have thought that securing a place to live was all that was needed to be all right. However, it seems they began running short of money and started experiencing financial difficulties. They approached me for financial assistance.
Hannah, please. Lend us some money. You're actually making a lot, right?
Brandon can't work. Don't you think abandoning him after divorce is too cold? Fed up with their self-serving rhetoric, I simply stated, no, and firmly pushed them away. Rejected by me and apparently denied assistance by father-in-law, they attempted to apply for welfare under mother-in-law's name. However, she was still in her late 40s and in good health without any chronic illness. She was considered capable of working. Therefore, she was ineligible for welfare. Reluctantly, she started working multiple part-time jobs from dawn till dusk. I occasionally hear from a once close neighbor that she, now toiling away, has lost her former beauty due to exhaustion. Furthermore, I've heard that the relationship between her and my ex-husband has worsened, with frequent quarrels. During her absence, a young male helper visits to care for my ex-husband, and there have been sightings suggesting a suspiciously close relationship between him and her. Some speculate that she might be having an affair with the helper. Hopefully, it doesn't lead to another mess, but it's no longer my concern. Leaving their issues aside, after the divorce, I revived various activities I had given up on due to my husband's care. I enjoy shopping trips, overnight travels. And now that I no longer need to work from home, I've returned to working at the office. Though working from home was convenient, I missed interacting with colleagues, and returning to the workplace has been unexpectedly pleasant. When I was caring for my ex-husband, I always felt rushed to return home early, but now that's no longer a concern. Savoring the freedom to roam outside without any worries, I cherish my life more than ever. My name is Grace Johnson. I'm a 41-year-old housewife. Currently, I live with my husband Hudson and our daughter Aria, just the three of us. Hudson, who is a year older than me, was a senior in high school. I had a thing for older guys. And Hudson was quite the standout at school, always at the center of attention. He was tall, with a model-like face, and I remember he was probably the most popular guy in school. I fell for him at first sight as soon as I enrolled and pursued him relentlessly for 2 years until he graduated. At the graduation ceremony, I went to get a button from his jacket. Well, not just the second button, but almost all of them were gone. After Hudson graduated, it felt like there was a huge void in my heart. I couldn't bring myself to date any other guys. You know, like having a major crush on someone and then they're gone. After he left, I just drifted through my high school days without much purpose. But a turning point came when I started college. At a drinking party I was invited to by a friend. Hudson happened to be there by chance. You're Hudson, right? I'm Grace, your junior from high school. Do you remember me? When I approached him, he looked at me intently. With so many girls chasing after him in school, I didn't expect him to remember me, just one among many. But Hudson said, Grace, right? The band girl? I've seen you practicing late in the classroom. Just knowing he remembered me made me incredibly happy. After that, I bumped into him several times at college parties. Though we attended different universities, we had mutual friends, so Hudson was often there. He was still very popular, but I made every effort to stay close to him and finally got to go on a date with him when he landed a job. I finally got to go on a date with him alone when he landed a job. I invited him out to celebrate under the pretext of a job celebration, but he initially turned me down lightly. I'm only interested in fancy places. So, I booked a high-end restaurant and invited him again. Hudson's eyes widened when he heard the name of the restaurant. Well, I guess that was to be expected. It was not the kind of place a regular student could afford. Thanks to that, Hudson was in a good mood and accepted the dinner date. He seemed quite pleased with the luxurious meal in a private room at the high-end restaurant. I had researched in advance what he wanted and presented him with an expensive watch during the meal. When I gave him the watch, I confessed, "Hudson, I've liked you since high school. Would you go out with me?" Hudson was silent for a moment after my confession. Just when I thought it was over, he smiled broadly. "Sure. But I'm a bit high maintenance, so be prepared," he said, holding my hand. I was so happy I could have fainted. I liked his somewhat arrogant demeanor. Being a student, my perspective was generally youthful and naive. And I genuinely believed it was no problem at all that he was high maintenance. "Whatever you wish for, I'll make it happen," I told him, and I officially became his girlfriend. Hudson doesn't know, but the high-end restaurant we went to that day was actually owned by my grandmother. I'm truly grateful to my grandmother for arranging a private room where I could successfully confess my feelings. This is how my relationship with Hudson began. He had warned me about his self-centeredness even before we started dating, and sure enough, he lived up to expectations. He always puts his feelings first. But what surprised me more was how much kinder Hudson was than I had anticipated. He always carries heavy things for me and even opens the car door for me when we're driving. In restaurants, he pulls out the chair for me, and he does all this smoothly. I can't even count how much I've spent on Hudson during our 2 years of dating. I've given him almost everything he's ever wanted as a gift. And when Hudson said he wanted kids, I took it as his way of proposing. I had decided I would give Hudson whatever he wanted, and I was thrilled that he was thinking about marriage, so I immediately started preparing for marriage and pregnancy. That's how we were blessed with our first daughter, Aria, and our marriage became a reality. The joy of marrying Hudson, the man I had always admired, has not faded even now. Even if I come to resent him at times, I think it's still a beautiful memory. The first time I discovered Hudson's affair was when Aria was in elementary school. Learning that the other woman was the instructor at Aria's swimming class left me speechless. Apparently, Hudson had been given her contact information in secret when he took Aria to her class. I was disgusted by the instructor's actions, but I knew Hudson was that type of person from the moment I fell for him at first sight. Hudson's looks have the charm to captivate anyone instantly. Later, I found out that there were 2 or 3 other women he was seeing at the time. Like with the swimming instructor, it seems he was often suddenly given contact information or approached. Hudson can't resist beautiful women, so he probably took the bait as soon as he was approached. I found out about the swimming instructor when I saw the 2 of them in the car together. The very car I had given to Hudson for his most recent birthday. Naturally, I cried and confronted Hudson. I was filled with intense anger over Hudson's involvement with another woman and the fear that he might leave this home. Hudson admitted to the affair and begged for my forgiveness. "I'm really sorry. I want to protect the life I have with you and Aria. It was just a moment of madness. Please forgive me. The only person I love is you, Grace." How could I not forgive him after he said that? Yes, even after years of marriage, I'm still head over heels for my husband. Because I married the man I admired, I always end up forgiving him. If Hudson wants me to cheer up, I'll do it. Then he becomes kind again. I'm fully aware that I'm a hopelessly naive and foolish wife. But if it keeps our family together, then that's okay. Mom, did you forgive Dad again? That's why he keeps doing whatever he wants. You can't give in to his whims anymore, okay? That's how I got scolded by my daughter. Then, when Arya turned 13, another of Hudson's affairs came to light. This time, it was with a receptionist at his workplace. Apparently, the fiancé, who worked in the same company as a receptionist, caught Hudson at her place. That led to a significant confrontation. The affair reached Hudson's boss through her, and although Hudson had to pay compensation, his boss kept it under wraps, so the affair didn't spread throughout the company. But Hudson became dissatisfied with the penalty and stopped going to work. You know, I've been thinking about switching to a company with better conditions. It's good timing, and it's better for me and you, right, Grace? There was no apology for the incident with the receptionist, and his reasoning was completely illogical to me. But in the end, I forgave Hudson again. Arya was furious with me. She had just started middle school and was feeling distrustful of her father. In fact, it was Arya who told me about Hudson's dates with the receptionist. I saw them on my way back from tutoring. I'm glad I wasn't with any friends. Because of my leniency with Hudson, Arya ended up becoming quite responsible. She's been working hard in school and even has plans to study abroad at a university overseas after graduating high school. Thinking that it wouldn't do for her husband to remain unemployed forever, I introduced Hudson to the company he had talked about, which offered better conditions. It seems the terms were to his satisfaction because Hudson switched jobs immediately. 4 years have passed since then. Surprisingly, my husband has been working seriously. He took a job in sales, which seems to suit him well. However, the company he joined deals with pharmaceuticals and cosmetics, and since it offers many products for women, he became a salesperson in the cosmetics department. I was really worried about that. But even with more opportunities to interact with women, Hudson has been coming straight home for his family. As Arya started preparing for her overseas studies in her senior year of high school, our family finally seemed to settle down. It was soon after that Hudson had to go on a solo assignment. I really wanted to go with him, but he said, Arya's high school life is important too, so I'm counting on you, Grace, while I'm away. I just can't say no to Hudson's requests. So, as Hudson said, I decided to stay by Arya's side and keep the home running. Though things between Hudson and Arya seem to be going well for now, Arya still seems to harbor a bit of resentment towards him. It's kinda weird how Dad suddenly became so tame. Well, I can understand how she feels. But these past few years, I haven't sensed any signs of other women from Hudson. Instead, he's been coming home every day and even goes out with the family on his days off. Arya might call me soft, but I want to believe in Hudson. That doesn't mean Hudson's whims have disappeared. He refused the apartment prepared by his company for his solo assignment. He didn't like the old and lived in properties. The company said it's fine to live wherever if he pays the rent himself, so Hudson chose a place he liked. The only fun I'll have on my assignment is watching TV, right? Oh, and make sure to get a brand new hairdryer too. I can't even count how much I've spent on Hudson. I was planning to use Hudson's earnings for Arya's study abroad funds, but it looks like I'll end up using my own money to set up Hudson's living arrangements and pay his rent for the assignment. Mom, you're too soft on Dad. If he just lived in the apartment the company provided, none of this would have happened. I got scolded by my daughter and felt a bit remorseful. So, Arya went with Hudson for his move. She said if I went, I'd just give in to Hudson's demands and end up buying unnecessary things. This is the first time living apart from Hudson, and I cried when seeing him off. Arya seemed a bit exasperated, but Hudson was kind. I'll come back on my days off, so have some delicious food ready for me, he said, patting my back. 2 days after Hudson's move and Arya's return, she told me. Everything went smoothly, so don't worry. I'm glad I left it to Arya. If it were me, I might not have been able to leave Hudson because I'd miss him too much. It's been 3 weeks since Hudson went on his assignment. He said he'd be too busy to come home right away. Tomorrow is a day off, and Hudson is coming home tonight for the first time in a while. I started preparing a feast just like Hudson wanted. Aren't you going overboard with this every time? Arya would say, but I don't mind going the extra mile for Hudson. By 7 p.m., I had a feast laid out on the table, waiting for Hudson's return. But Hudson never came. When I couldn't reach him by phone, I worried that something might have happened to him. Eventually, I told Arya to eat without me, and I waited until morning, but I only managed to get in touch with him the next day at noon. Sorry, there was a problem at work, and I couldn't make it back. I couldn't even contact you, and I'm really sorry for worrying you. I'm just relieved that you are safe. It seemed like Arya sensed something but didn't say anything to me. On the other end of the phone, Hudson said, I'll make it up to you next time. Hey, remember the restaurant we went to when we first started dating? Let's go there and talk about everything. I was truly happy that Hudson remembered that moment. I booked the day we confessed our feelings and told Hudson about it. Can you make the reservation under my name? I want to go in style since we're making the effort. Hudson requested, so I changed the reservation right away. I'll definitely come home this weekend. I want to see Arya too. My spirits lifted again. I started preparing immediately.
Mom, you're expecting too much from Dad. I don't want to see you get hurt by him.
Arya said coldly. It seemed like she had a feeling that Hudson might not come home this weekend either. That weekend, the feast laid out was not eaten by my husband. Arya comforted me gently as I cried on the sofa. After that, Hudson never returned home from his solo assignment. During this time, Arya, who was worried, made a suggestion. Mom, if you want to see Dad, why don't we go to him? Why didn't I think of that? I could have gone to see him any weekend. I nodded and began to prepare immediately. But Arya, with a serious face, said, Mom, there's one condition. I'm going with you. And no matter what, stay calm. Arya's face was so serious that I decided to listen to her wish. Hudson's place was quite far, taking several hours by train. We finally arrived at the apartment where Hudson lives. The room was a bit luxurious, and since I arranged it, I had the keys. Hudson would surely be surprised. Entering the room, the entrance was clean, and the shoes were neatly arranged. The living room was tidy too, not what you'd expect from a bachelor's living space. But something felt off. There were 2 sets of wallets, dishes, toothbrushes, almost as if someone was living there. My heart raced, and as I encountered various pieces of evidence, I couldn't deny that Hudson was living here with someone else. Then, I saw an envelope under the table and my heart pounded. A green envelope. It was a filled-out divorce form, complete with Hudson's signature and seal. I was speechless. My husband intended to divorce. Then, my daughter spoke from behind me. Let's go home, Mom. It's useless to stay here. I hadn't even met Hudson yet, but what was there to talk about? With the filled-out divorce form, Hudson's intentions were clear. Tears naturally overflowed. I barely remember how we got home. Arya supported me as we took the train and a taxi from the station. By the time I realized, it was late at night, and I was sitting on the sofa. A blanket, likely placed by Arya, was on my shoulders, and there was a warm drink on the table. Arya was sitting next to me, fiddling with some device. This is a webcam I installed when Dad moved. I told Dad it was so we could talk anytime, and he happily allowed it. Though he's probably forgotten by now. She likely took it with her when she left the room. Mom, I told you before we went, but please brace yourself. What I'm about to do might be hard for you, but I'm worried about you. Arya said, then played the footage from the camera connected to her smartphone. It's okay, my wife will forgive me no matter what I do. Her family seems really wealthy, you know? They've always given me whatever I wanted whenever I asked for it. The screen showed Hudson and another woman talking. The woman he was talking to was young and beautiful. I've managed to turn quite a bit of what I mooched off her into good money. So, I'm not really interested in her family's wealth. It's too much hassle to ask about it. My daughter's about to graduate from high school, so I'm thinking it's about time to get a divorce and free myself. I was in shock at Hudson's unbelievable words. Every time, Arya had to remind me to stay strong by saying, "Mom, hold on." After saying, "I'm sorry, Mom," Arya carried me to the bedroom. I couldn't tell if I had slept or not until morning came. When I went to the living room, Arya was already there. Seeing me, she rushed over with a worried look. She seemed to want to say something, but when I showed her a smile, her expression changed to one of relief.
Arya, I'm sorry for worrying you. I'll submit that divorce form as he wishes.
Arya nodded, and we hugged each other tightly. The old me might have been consumed by jealousy and cried my eyes out. But now, strangely, I felt nothing towards Hudson. The day after we visited Hudson's house, Arya and I quickly went to the city hall and submitted the divorce form. Since then, we've been busy with Arya's high school graduation and preparations for her study abroad. There's been no contact from Hudson. He must be enjoying his life with his mistress, thinking we won't reach out. I thought he might come back on his own for Arya's graduation, but left him be when she said, "He's a stranger now." Today is the day Arya leaves for her study abroad. I was talking to a friend who came to see us off at the airport. During that time, I was checking my smartphone to see if there was anything I had left undone. I've cancelled the old mobile phone, and the sale of the house is complete. Hudson's things have been sent to him, so that's settled. Oh, and I need to cancel the lease on that apartment by the end of next month. As I was muttering to myself, Arya, having said goodbye to her friend, came over. "Mom, it's almost time." I nodded and followed her, pulling my carry-on. Today, Arya is setting off for her study abroad. And I've decided to move abroad as well. There's no need for me to wait for Hudson at home anymore. Arya and I are starting a new life together. I've cancelled the old mobile phone and sold the house we lived in. Arya and I will disappear from Hudson's life without leaving anything behind. That was his last wish. Today was supposed to be the reservation at that restaurant. He hasn't contacted me. Probably, he wanted the reservation under his name to impress some woman. I'll ask Grandma about how he's doing tomorrow. It adds to the excitement of starting a new life. It's been a week since Arya and I moved abroad. We've finished moving in the packages, and our life is starting to settle. The day after we arrived, I called Grandma according to her time zone. She knew about my divorce from Hudson. And she told me about the restaurant. That day, he brought a woman to Grandma's restaurant. Just like 18 years ago, booking a private room in the high-end restaurant. Of course, there's a charge for using a private room at this place. When it came time to pay, Hudson's eyes widened at the amount. When I went with him, there was a discount because of my face pass, but this time it had nothing to do with me. There was no discount, so he must have paid the regular price. However, Hudson would never do something embarrassing. I assumed he presented his card as if nothing was wrong. Though my grandma mentioned his hand was shaking a bit at that moment. I suspect Hudson must have called me afterwards. Probably asking for money. But my number has been cancelled. Hudson must have felt something was off, but he doesn't know my current contact information. Of course, Arya's number has been changed too. I wonder how he's doing. And now, a month has passed since we arrived overseas. Hudson must be in trouble by now. The apartment he's living in is under my name and is due to be cancelled at the end of this month. He should have received a prior notice, but I wonder if he's realized it. It'd be fine if his roommate is someone he can trust. While thinking about this, Arya spoke to me. A friend from back home contacted me. Someone was making a scene at the place where our house used to be. Arya thought it was Dad. Dad seems to be in quite a panic. Just imagining Hudson in a panic is funny. His handsome image is ruined. Mom, what do we do? Go back home for a while? I had thought we'd need to talk to Hudson eventually. But I don't want to meet him. We're not going back. But I will talk to Dad. Arya tilted her head, but I had a plan. This is really the end. Let's face him properly and say goodbye. Arya and I took a nap to adjust to the time difference, preparing for the face-to-face with Hudson. We're no longer a couple, but let's settle this once and for all. Hudson must be sufficiently damaged by now, but that's not enough for me. I've decided not to forgive Hudson. Arya and I sat on the sofa, staring at the webcam above the TV. Soon, my smartphone received a call. They were ready. When I turned on the TV, Hudson appeared on the screen, with a few adults watching the situation in the background. Wah. Grace? Arya too. Where are you guys? Hudson's voice was slightly delayed from his mouth movements. Hudson, long time no see. You look well. Where are we? That's something I can't tell you. Where are you? Hudson, looking confused, answered. Well, I was called by my boss to the president's office at the company this morning. He seemed uncomfortable under the watchful eyes. Hudson didn't seem to grasp the situation. I asked them to accompany you today because I have a lot to tell you, I said, and Hudson looked even more bewildered. First, the divorce form you filled out has been successfully submitted. You probably know since you received the acceptance notice. You were so kind to sign it yourself. No complaints, right? Hudson appeared confused by my words. He definitely had the intention to divorce. However, Hudson countered with something else. But, selling the house is foul play. That was my house too. You shouldn't have sold it without my permission. If you sold it, you should share the money with me. The conversation was veering off track, but since I was planning to discuss this eventually, I decided to explain it right away. You might be misunderstanding something, but that house wasn't ours. It was in my parents' names. So, if my parents decided to sell the house, we had to comply. Hudson looked as if he couldn't believe it. But it's true. Our house was quite a mansion. There was no way Hudson could afford such a house with his income. It was a house my parents had given me as a wedding gift. It happened nearly 20 years ago, so he must have forgotten. I sent you your belongings, didn't I? The watch I gave you, the suits, the accessories. I bought them because you wanted them, but you treated them like trash in your room. Maybe you've already turned them into cash. It probably hit the mark. Hudson clenched his teeth for a moment. It's embarrassing to admit, but why did I spoil this man so much? I loved him that much. The fact is true, but suddenly, I felt a surge of regret. I loved you so much that I was willing to fulfill any request. Even when you cheated, I forgave you, thinking you would eventually come back to me. But if you wanted a divorce, then it's over. I wiped the tears I had been holding back. Really, as Arya said, maybe I was too lenient on him, too forgiving. This divorce could well be said to be my own doing. Seeing me like this, Arya spoke up.
Dad, Mom has been waiting for you all this time. No matter what I said, Mom believed in you. You betrayed her, Dad. I won't forgive you.
Arya played the recorded voice of Hudson that she had captured. Where did you get this recording from? Hudson was clearly shaken. Arya also showed a picture of Hudson with another woman on the screen.
Dad, unlike Mom, I've always doubted you.
Sorry.
I really wanted to prove your innocence and looked into things, but the more I dug, the more evidence of your affairs I found. You've been pretending not to cheat these past few years, but you've really been playing around quite a bit.
Arya presented facts I didn't know. Apparently, Hudson had also committed adultery within his company. Arya had contacted my parents in advance and investigated Hudson's infidelity.
No wonder you were coming home properly. Adultery during work hours is ridiculous.
After Arya's remark, Hudson showed a slightly sad face.
I don't know who you're living with now, but it can be found out. Since Mom can't say it, I will. Dad, we're going to sue you for compensation.
Hearing about compensation, Hudson stood up from his chair. He started getting angry, his face turning red.
What compensation? There's no way I have that kind of money. Yeah, even the restaurant the other day charged me a crazy amount.
I couldn't help but smirk when he brought up the restaurant. Arya immediately retorted.
That restaurant was a place of memories for you and Mom. I can't believe you'd take another woman there. It's terrible how you deceived Mom. Do you know how much she was looking forward to it? Dad, you're the worst of all. The lack of money is your own fault. We'll make sure you pay.
The staring contest between Hudson and Arya through the screen continued. That's when I took over from Arya. So, Hudson, you'll be hearing from a lawyer. We're prepared for this to go to court. And, as you probably know, the house you're living in now will also be cancelled soon. Make sure you prepare to move. Hudson stood, staring at the screen. Having been adored by everyone around him until now, his anger at being belittled like this was immeasurable. But he could use a taste of defeat.
Come on, not forgiving the cheating now, that's dirty. Sneaking around collecting evidence of someone's cheating is creepy and underhanded. And suing for compensation, canceling the current house, how monstrous can you get? You have the worst personality. I wish I could see your parents' faces.
Hudson yelled so loud it seemed the speaker might break. You want to see my parents' faces? Well, let's make that final wish come true. My parents have been behind you this whole time. Hudson froze at my words. He looked back at me with a puzzled expression. And then, he slowly turned around. There stood the president and executive director of Hudson's company. The president is my father, and the executive director is my mother. Because you said you didn't want a wedding or a meet and greet because it was too much trouble, you've never seen my parents' faces. Despite your selfishness, my parents respected the man I chose, and have always watched over us generously. Any complaints? Hudson was shaking a bit. He was probably reflecting on his behavior here. When you said you wanted to change jobs, my parents helped you. That's why you're working at this company. Then, my father, who had been silent until now, spoke up as the president, not just as Grace's father.
From here on, I have something to say not as Grace's father but as the president. Hudson, it's come to my attention that not only have you been committing adultery during work hours, but you also have had romantic relationships with women from our business contacts. And it's not just one or two women. We've received numerous complaints.
Hudson's face went pale. My mother, the executive director, spoke to Arya and me through the screen. From here, it will be about company matters, so you two should rest. If anything happens, we'll contact you. Thank you. Arya and I thanked my mother. And finally, I also had words for Hudson. Hudson, leave Arya to me. By then, goodbye. Then Hudson approached the screen, crying and shouting. I'm sorry. It was my fault. The most important thing to me is you two. Forgive me. Let's live together again. The video cut off midway. Probably, my mother ended the call. This ordeal has caused a lot of worry for my parents. I plan to send them a thank you message later. Arya and I hugged each other, both crying. It's over. This is truly goodbye to Hudson. A few days later, Arya's life at school overseas begins today. After the entrance ceremony, Arya and I had a meal together. And we talked a little about Hudson. In addition to betraying me, Hudson had issues with his work attitude at the company and seemed to have angered my parents considerably. Moreover, it was revealed that he had been having affairs with various people related to his work, naturally leading to his inability to stay at my parents' company. Apparently, his way of doing business also caused some losses, and the company is considering suing him for damages. The woman Hudson had been living with, who knew he was married and was a co-worker from the same company, has agreed to the compensation claim and paid in full. Whether their relationship continues is unknown. Having lost everything, Hudson reportedly started a night job through an acquaintance. The compensation from Hudson is being deposited in small amounts each month. Mom, from now on, I'll protect you. Oh, that's reassuring. But I became stronger too. It's still my turn to protect you. We laughed together, saying that no matter what happens, I don't want to ruin this happy relationship with my daughter. With that thought, I watch my daughter forge ahead towards her dreams. Life overseas has its uncertainties, but as a mother, I'll live strong and enjoy the time with my daughter.